Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game of Thrones Tower of Babel breakdown. As always, I am Julian Meush. I am joined by Kailey D'Souza.
What's up?
And we are here to discuss Season 7, Episode 4, The Spoils of War. And if you've never listened to the podcast before, first of all, welcome. And second of all, let me just quickly go over what we're all about. We are about to unpack all of the events of this week's episode of HBO's Game of Thrones, help put things in context. But at the same time, we're also not going to talk about any spoilers that might still exist to the books. We talk about the show as a show. Okay, so with that out of the way, we are going to change up the format a bit today. I got a little bit of feedback on some of the listener email stuff, and we're going to try to integrate it more organically into the show, so it's going to fit in with the stuff we're talking about a little bit more, which I think is a good idea. So appreciate those who reached out to me about that. We do also have a special announcement we're going to go through. That's going to be awesome.
So pumped.
It's really good stuff. And then I'm going to I guess I'll do it right now. I'll just go through our social media stuff right now, which is at Tower Babblecast on Twitter and Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast if you want to reach us. And that's the best way to do it. Okay, so Dan, we have a new partner, right? We partnered up with readpop.com, and we have an awesome announcement. Why don't you walk us through this?
So yes, readpop.com, they have a bunch of Game of Thrones merchandise, memorabilia, collectibles, whatever you want to call it, that they are featuring for this season of Game of Thrones. So they have 2 boxes available, and there's a special edition and a limited edition. I'll go over what's in them in a second. But what we get to do is give them away to our fans. They've sent us a couple for us to sample, and then we get to give some away to the fans, which is why we're so excited right now.
Yeah, it is awesome because we never had a chance to do this kind of thing before. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to run a little contest giveaway thing. We're going to go over that in just a sec. And then, whoever, gets involved will be entered to a random draw, and then we'll be giving out these promotional boxes of Game of Thrones stuff, memorabilia, like you said. So think of what's that? There's like a company that does similar, that sends out like monthly themed boxes with like loot box, I think it's called. It's similar to that.
There's a couple that do that.
Yeah, so this is just Game of Thrones stuff.
Uh-huh.
So Dan, what kind of stuff is in these boxes?
Kailey, if you've been listening, I've been traveling. They recently sent the box, so I'm super excited to get into this. I haven't actually got my hands on any of this stuff yet, but I'll list off a couple of the things that are most exciting to me. Collectible 20th anniversary edition of Game of Thrones, the first book of the series, bound in eco-trim fiber, gilded pages, color illustrations. Sounds amazing.
Okay, yeah. Very cool.
Very cool, right?
I've never read the book, so this would be good.
No, but even if you don't read the books, it's cool to have that on your mantle. This thing looks amazing.
You want to listen. Even what Daniel's saying is basically, if you don't read books, you should have a bookshelf so you look.
Everybody's got to have
intelligent.
A bookshelf.
That's right. Yeah.
Another one that I'm really excited about is the set of minted coins of the people who have died within the series. So I think there's one for Ned Stark, Tywin Lannister, Joffrey, Robb Stark, that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
But then there's like their in-world coins. So they're essentially the premise is that they were minted by goldsmiths in Westeros, and they each have like a little write-up about them. I did a little bit of research on this, so that sounds really cool. You could learn Dothraki. There's a book to learn Dothraki. The board game, the Fantasy Flight game, Game of Thrones, that came out, that was like from before the series started. Something that's been on my list for a while that I haven't had a chance to pick up.
All right, so here's the thing. We're going to go over what the different boxes have in them over the next couple weeks. In the meantime, if you want to get a chance to get one of these boxes, which I think if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you're going to want this stuff because I'm excited about it, even though it's all the way back in Winnipeg and I'm probably not going to see it for a while. I like just know that I have it. Mm-hmm. Basically, what we're going to do is, I said a couple weeks back, if you want to leave us an iTunes review, take a screen cap of it and send it to us.
Or Stitcher, or Google Play,
right.
Whatever.
Or whatever, yeah, any podcatcher that you use. And you want to send it to us, that would be a good idea. So that is what I was talking about. So leave us a review on iTunes. It's huge for the show. It helps us reach more fans of Game of Thrones, which is awesome. But it also is going to give you a chance to win one of these Game of Thrones boxes. So leave us a review. Send us a screen cap of it to our email, towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com, and you'll be automatically entered to win, and then we'll pick a random winner. But if you want to just skip that whole process and you don't want to, try to win one, you just want to pay for one, you can go over to the website, readpop.com. There's going to be a link in our show notes, okay? So that's going to be on our website, in your podcast feed, should be all in there. You can go over to readpop.com, which is reedpop.com, and put in the promo code BabbleBox, BABBLEBOX, all one word, as a promo code in their checkout, and you'll get 10% off as well, which shows that not only are you supporting us, but you're supporting them, which is what this is all about, and would be awesome, okay? And here's the best part of this whole thing is basically because of these guys, we can now guarantee a bonus episode at the end of the season.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there is no qualms about that. We can now absolutely guarantee that. So now that that's out of the way, and again, super excited about it. Now that's out of the way, let's get into a little bit of news, because Dan, I don't know if you know this, but HBO was hacked last week. So reading from a Slash Film article by Jacob Hall, I'm just gonna read it. This way is the most easiest way to just express it to you guys. A few days ago, HBO fell victim to a cybersecurity attack, and hackers made off with 1.5 terabytes of data, including scripts for and episodes of the network's current shows. Episodes of Ballers and Room 104 made their way online quickly, but it took a few days for the latest episode of Game of Thrones to appear in the shadier corners of the internet. Just 2 days after HBO enlisted the assistance of the FBI and the cybersecurity firm Mandiant to investigate the theft of their content, Episode 4 of Game of Thrones Season 7 started to show up on Google Drive postings on Reddit. However, Variety reports that this leaked copy of the episode was not a part of the data stolen by the hackers. It seems that the leak actually originated from Star India, one of HBO's distribution partners. So obviously now that the episode is aired, it's not a big deal anymore. In the past, was it last season that the first 3 episodes were leaked online?
That sounds about right,
last season. And I have a friend she is just, she can't help herself.
Oh,
she
no,
has
come
to
on.
watch them. She has to. So she like downloaded them, and then she was like wants to ask me questions. I'm like, listen, you can ask me as many questions as you want 3 weeks into the show, because I'm not going to talk about it, because I watched them on Sunday nights with everyone else.
Yes.
So if this ever happens again, just know, it's probably legit. You can probably watch the episode, but for those who watched it like that, in this low quality way that it was distributed, they did not get the full experience, because that battle at the end of this week's episode is pretty intense. And if you didn't see that in full high def, then you're missing out.
And
right?
also just tisk, right? Like,
yeah, it just kind of like emboldens the hackers, right? And I guess in this case it's a leak, which is even more annoying. But our policy is we ignore it. I kind of stay off social media for a little while when this kind of thing happens, especially right away, to avoid
you have to
any spoilers. And but after that, though, like once the episode's out, it's spoiler city on Twitter anyway. So all right, so now that is out of the way as well, I want to get into a couple listener questions and comments from last episode, and stuff that's not exactly pertinent to the events of this week. And then I have some more questions at the end that relate more directly to the events of this episode itself. So Amy Lynn Thompson on Twitter pointed out that the wolf that played Ghost, I mean, this could have been a news story as well. The wolf that played Ghost actually died a few months ago. And then she quickly and smartly mentioned, like right after, that it probably didn't have much impact on season 7 as far as filming, because it was already they were already done filming by then. But I thought, that was something that people might want to know, right?
Fair enough. That's sad news, of course.
It kind of puts it in a weird position. Like, what do you do? Just CGI in Ghost for the rest of the I don't, because it's not all CGI. It's like a real.
Oh, they still need a double. Yeah,
CG, right.
I think what they do, they honestly they film an actual animal and they kind of blow it up and then touch it up with CGI.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess if they don't show us Ghost long enough, we'll just forget what he looks like. So when they introduce a new wolf that is white, we'll be able to just be like, oh yeah, it looks close enough.
Yeah.
Is that the plan? Because we haven't seen Ghost all season, have we? I don't think so.
Not yet, no.
Not this season.
We haven't seen him since early last season, I believe.
Yeah, he wasn't even at the Battle of Bastards, so he's just doing his thing, man. He's always just been doing his own thing. So Dan, a friend of ours has sent us in a question, and you can send in questions as well to towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com. So I figured, Dan, should we answer it? I think we should. Yeah. All right. So there's the theory going around that it was Bran whispering in the ear in an attempt to alter history that made Aerys go mad. But if Bran were successful in doing this, would he prevent himself from being born? Aerys would never murder Ned's dad and brother, and Catelyn would marry Brandon Stark instead of Ned. You think someone with the ability to see all of history would figure that out? Oh. So before you answer, I'm just going to say quickly, Max, I think your answer to answer your question, like you basically just answered your own question. I don't think that that's actually what happened. But they also have to consider this. Everything that Bran does in the past already happened, right? It's all a closed loop, so he isn't actually changing anything, right? So even if it was him that was talking in the ear of Aerys, all of that stuff would have happened already and is going to happen and so on and so forth, right? So either way, it doesn't really matter, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Every time we talk about time travel, I confuse myself. So, Dan, what do you think?
Well, I feel like, okay, first of all, friend of the show, Max, they call him the Kid. He's a good friend of ours.
Who they call him, the Kid?
They call him the Kid.
I've never called him that.
We call him the Kid sometimes.
Okay, all right, interesting.
So okay, Bran whispering in his ear to alter history that made Aerys go mad.
Mm-hmm. Think like Hodor becoming Hodor because of Bran. Yeah.
But I guess, like, realistically, it's probably Bran whispering in his ear in order to make him go mad that sets these events in order, right?
Right.
So, I mean, if that were the case, that's probably why Bran, he's been so sad and like, so stone-faced this whole time. It's like, he's doing what he feels he has to do, Like, I made the Dr. Manhattan analogy last week. He's a puppet that sees the strings, but he still has to go through the motions. Does that make sense?
Like Destiny, basically.
Exactly.
But unlike us, who if Destiny were real, let's say, and there is no choice, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know that, right?
Yes.
But he would know, which would be extremely depressing.
Yeah, but there's still no choice.
Yeah.
So maybe Bran was whispering, and that's what drove Aerys mad, if I'm reading this question correctly. But he wasn't trying to stop the Mad King from going mad. Wasn't trying to stop the Mad King from murdering Rickard and Bran.
The other way around, right? That he did it to
as much as it pained him. Yeah. He had to make the Mad King go crazy in order to murder his grandfather and uncle.
Right. Okay. I feel like that's
the first time I went through that, I was also working off the theory. There's another theory online of how the original Three-Eyed Raven is also Bran, like an older version of Bran. There's this weird time traveling theory.
Yeah. There's also the theory that every Bran in history, like all the Brandon Starks, are all just Bran.
So he's Brandon the Builder as well.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's. I also think that's a little crazy.
It's a little far fetched, but who knows?
Right.
It could easily have been the previous Three-Eyed Raven whispering in the Mad King's ear. That character probably would have reason to undermine the Targaryens, or that side of the Targaryens.
Why is that? Do we know any about his history? I don't remember learning anything about where he came from.
I don't know if they've actually gone through it in the show, and I don't know if they will, but it kind of feels spoilery, so I maybe shouldn't mention it.
Okay.
I should have mentioned it, actually, now that I think of it.
Well, it's vague. That's vague enough. All right, so here's another great question. And this time from friend of the show, Benedict Baradoun.
Baradur.
I know that's probably not how it's pronounced, but Ben, I'm just gonna keep pronouncing it that way because it's way too much fun. So he says, lately I've been thinking that everyone tends to believe that Jon or Daenerys is Azor Ahai. But personally, I think it would be cool if it was the Hound. Why bring him back to life? He was only a secondary or tertiary character previously on the show. Secondly, he has been on the show since season 1. He fulfills all the criteria of Azor Ahai, in my opinion. His burnt face could be the born amid smoke and fire. He's going to fight the White Walkers. Probably that's not very probable because they don't focus on him that much. But just think it would be a nice twist to the story. So Dan, what do you think? Could the Hound be Azor Ahai?
I mean, anything's possible. This email really
what a great answer, Daniel.
no, this email really like got me going. I think I believe I wrote like an essay back to him. I went off for a little bit.
Wait, was it as long as our show notes, which are like up to 4,000, 5,000 words?
Honestly, I feel like it was close. I feel like I was writing it and I kept being like, oh, and also this, and also this. It was thought provoking. I like the idea. I mean, I think like he said, the Hound is probably too minor a character for that to be the case. I feel
he's
like
a fan favorite now.
He's
Everyone
a fan favorite
loves the Hound now.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it would just come out of left field. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense.
Does it feel? And here's what the question. Anytime anyone comes at me with like a theory in this vein or the crazier ones, there's some pretty crazy. Daniel, I don't know if you know that there's a theory out there that Varys is actually a merman. Like this is like a well-known theory on the internet. Yeah,
I haven't heard that one.
I think it's all because of his ability to get to that ship. Like the end of last season.
We can go ahead and squash that right now. That's not the case.
No, right. So I'm just throwing that out as an example. But basically, anytime someone comes at me with a crazy theory, I just say, okay, yes, there's a chance, likely that like, yeah, based on what you've told me, likely that there is definitely a chance that could be. But the question I always ask is that at all satisfying in a storytelling manner? If just random Joe Blow was a Azor Ahai, right? If Gendry was a Azor Ahai, is that satisfying? And yes, I consider Gendry to be random Joe Blow. He's like the definition of random Joe Blow in my mind. But I also want to mention that a friend of mine texted me today. He's like, so what's Gendry's deal? Like, I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, he was on this week's episode. I'm like, no, he wasn't.
Nope.
He's like, are you thinking Podrick? Like, oh, that's who it was. Yeah. But they do kind of look the same.
Fair enough. And they're both, unfortunately, like equally forgettable. I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's kind of part of Pod's charm, though.
Well, no, and that's the way they're.
And
played.
hey, Dan,
that's the way they're played. They're underfoot characters.
Yeah, that's true. And Dan, I don't think the women forget Podrick.
Clearly.
Anyway, so that's how I look at it. Is just if it needs to be satisfying from a storytelling perspective.
Sure.
For these kinds of things to pay off, and I don't think that the Hound being Azor Ahai is as satisfying as, say, Jon and Dany or someone else.
Sure. And that makes sense. And we do have to look at the show through that lens of it being a story, it being a series, that kind of thing. I also, like, when I think about these things, though, I try to think about it from the prophecy first, right? Mm-hmm. So there's the Hound, born amidst salt and smoke, sure, the fire. But the full prophecy, I'm gonna paraphrase a little because I don't remember it verbatim, but it's when the Red Star bleeds, Azor Ahai will be reborn amidst salt and smoke.
What was the Hound doing during that the Red Star?
So the Red Star, that's the comet.
The comet,
right, from season 2 that hasn't been mentioned since.
Yeah, that they didn't mention then. They just it was just shown. It was just
everywhere. Yeah, it was all over the place. So it's easy to look at the prophecy almost literally and say that's Daenerys. While the comet was shooting across her, she sacrificed her one true love, which is part of the original Azor Ahai story. He kills Nissa to create Lightbringer, the sword, right?
Nissa.
That was the woman he loved.
Mm-hmm. Not the greatest name, but okay.
Sure. Yeah. So she did that. And the other part of the story is to wake dragons from stone, and she literally woke 3 dragons from their stone eggs.
That's true.
From making that sacrifice, right? So it's easy to say, obviously that's Daenerys.
I mean, it's almost so obvious that it's like, if it's anyone else, it's kind of...
Right.
And then they make the whole point of making clear that it could be prince or princess last week.
And every time in the books, anytime they talk about when Daenerys was born, it was a crazy storm. They always say she was born on Dragonstone amidst salt and smoke. Like it's just part of the vernacular sort of thing, right? So it's kind of shoved down your throat to a degree, which when it's overdone like that, it leads you to believe that it's not the case, that that's a mislead, a red herring, right?
Yeah, that's maybe, but at the same time, it could be a case of just overthinking it.
Oh, right? Definitely, and that's we do that all the time here.
That's literally the job.
So in terms of the Hound, what he was doing as the comet was overhead, not a lot of character development at the beginning of season 2, but season 2 ends with the Battle of the Blackwater, and I would argue that the Hound took a significant character change after that battle, right? Mm-hmm. So you could make the argument that he was born, quote unquote, as in like
doing
born
mental
anew.
Gymnastics to try to fit that one in, but
you know what I mean, like reborn. He was created. The person he is now was created in that battle amidst the salt of the bay and the smoke of the battle, right?
All right, I think we can move on to breaking down this week's episode. Again, Season 7, Episode 4, The Spoils of War. This one's directed by Matt Shakman, and this is his first directing credit for Game of Thrones, and he will be getting his second very shortly, as he's also directing next week's episode, Eastwatch. As far as background, he's a longtime TV director, having worked on a ton of shows, including Mad Men, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, The Good Wife, just to name a few. And I think he does a pretty good job, considering I don't think he's ever done anything as big as this battle that they.
Yeah, nothing on this scale.
Yeah, nothing close. Written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, which has been, I think they've written all but one episode this season so far. And we start in just outside of Highgarden. We kick off with Jaime, Bran, Lord Tarly, and Dickon escorting the gold stolen from Highgarden back to King's Landing. Jaime pays Bran a huge bag of gold, but Bran complains he still hasn't gotten his castle yet. It's all very funny. For a season that is having such a fast pace, I really appreciate moments like this that much more, these slow moments. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff in this episode. This also happens to be the shortest episode of Game of Thrones ever. And yet it still takes time to give us these scenes of like luxuriating in character. Yeah. The Arya and Brienne scene later on is another good example of that. And it doesn't just serve the plot, it serves character, which is really important and harkens back to season 1, season 2 of Game of Thrones, where at that time they wouldn't give us a battle like we saw at the end of the episode, but we'd have gotten a lot of moments like that. Yeah. So for those who are talking about the show rushing through to the end, I present to you Exhibit A, this kind of stuff, as being a prime example of not stuff that's just pure plot, although it does a bit of both. All right. In my estimation, this scene exists so that when we see these characters again at the end of the episode, we have some sense of time having passed, and that they traveled some distance. And they mention harvesting from all the farms in the Reach, so we know kind of what's being burned later on and what's at stake.
Yes.
Right? The show also gives us a nice close-up of the gold that's given to Bran, and we see it again when it falls off his horse later in the battle of the train battle, or whatever they call it. It felt like they were trying to give Bran some kind of character development by showing him leave the gold. And I'm just kind of jumping ahead to the end here because just for this one little piece, yeah. When he drops the gold, it's like they're trying to tell us something, but whatever it was didn't really hit home for me. What do you think the significance of that gold was? Because they did a close-up on it twice.
Well, I mean, they definitely did. It's hard to say because he's still a sellsword. Like he's a soldier for hire, the way it read for me is that he abandoned the gold to save his own skin, not to be a hero, not to save Jaime or take down the dragon. He did it because he would have died if he had stayed to pick it up, and he recognized that. I understand what you mean about them, really zoning in on it as though it were like his character, like having a change of heart, but that's really not how it felt as an audience member.
Mm. And then Jaime also mentions the whole, this gold is for the Iron Bank plot point. Yeah. Just again to drive that home, which takes us to the next scene, which is in King's Landing. Cersei is meeting with the bank rep at. What's his name again?
Fuck, I don't remember the guy's name. He's just a representative of the Iron Bank. If they named him, it was in like season 4 or something.
Yeah, bank guy. I don't know, businessman.
I'm still hoping that that's going to turn to be like Jaqen H'ghar, a faceless man, or some bullshit like that.
That would be pretty cool. That would be very cool. That would be the only version of that I think would be cool. Because this plot line is not interesting. So Cersei's meeting with the bank rep at the Red Keep, and he starts by mentioning, and there's this really weird transition where he starts talking before the scene cuts to like him talking. And normally you do that because you'd want to tie the two things together a bit more, but not a lot of what was happening was very relevant to that, but it's whatever.
Yeah, no, they've been doing a lot of weird experimental stuff like that this season. Some of it's worked very well.
Yeah,
this one didn't stick out to me. It's just kind of weird
to me. Yeah. Anyway, so he's basically saying he's never seen anyone repay a debt like this one, all in one payment before. And he also mentions to Cersei that she might need some outside investors now that this is all clear. This whole debt thing's all cleared up. So she talks about needing money to grow her armies and navies, which made me think of Star Wars of all things, because we were actually just talking about it before the show. This idea of ruling through strength, basically imperialism, right? The Empire in Star Wars is strong because its military is everywhere, right? And they rule through fear with their Star Destroyers and all that kind of stuff. Basically, what she's saying is, I want a bigger army and a bigger navy so that I can rule through fear. Like we already know that she wanted to, but in like a practical sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could also think Roman Empire or British Empire, but Star Wars works.
Yeah, at first, it's more relevant. Okay, we're talking nerdy shit. Star Wars is up there.
Understood.
Okay, but here's the thing: they also mentioned the Golden Company. So, who are they? That one's on you, Dan.
This is so weird because in my mind, the Golden Company. Okay, the Golden Company is one of the sellsword companies from Essos. Mm-hmm. What are the Second Sons was another one. Whatever they were, that the Second Sons, I think that's Dario Naharis, and they teamed up with Daenerys, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So the Golden Company is just another one of those, essentially a company of mercenaries. They're meant to have more honor and be sort of like more choosy about their clients. They're not just sell swords. There is a pretty significant tie-in with the Targaryen dynasty, but I don't know that that's part of the show, so I don't know if I should necessarily talk about it.
Well, they don't really talk about anything with it. They don't really say. They just mention their name, just a name drop. I guess for book readers, I think it's for you guys, but I knew it was important, but I don't know what it refers to.
Okay, so if anybody who has read the books is familiar with the Blackfire Rebellion, that's where the Golden Company comes from. None of that has been a part of the show, and I don't think it will be, because there are certain characters that were in the books that were a main part of that plot line that have been completely omitted. Okay. So I think, realistically, this is just going to be a sellsword company, and it was just the best name, the best one they could have chosen, because none of those characters that we're familiar with from the books are going to be in the show.
Okay.
I think. And if they are mind blown because there's only, 10 episodes left, that's fucking ridiculous. Right. Now it's not a time to add characters and storylines.
It's not. It's really not. I mean, this one is technically not a new storyline. We're picking it up from season 3 or something. But, we talked about this last week. It just, the craziest part of this whole thing is that this plot point is even being given this much screen time at all. It's obviously being built up for some kind of payoff, but I guess the real question to me is whether that payoff will be rewarding, and what that payoff will actually be. So the most clear, direct line would be that Cersei hires this sellsword company after paying off the debt with this gold, and by basically actually going into more debt. It's funny. So now that you paid back, would you like to take out another loan? Is basically what the bank is asking.
Isn't that how banks normally work?
Yes, that's correct. So they get this boost to their military, right? Which would help Cersei's side, but there could be some kind of twist in there, or it doesn't quite go that smoothly. But I'm just I don't care enough about this plotline to even put that much thought into it. So
it's because they started it up and then just dropped it for however long, and then now 2 seasons later they're like, oh yeah, remember this? Now it's a big deal. It's hard to care that much, and also it's banks and lending, and that stuff is kind of dry in the first place. Yeah.
I mean, the show is already pretty obtuse when it comes to family dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But to introduce banking and and that kind of stuff into it, just it's if you want to put people to sleep, that's a good way to do it. I mean, obviously this episode doesn't do that, but it talk about grinding the show to a halt. It's a good thing that this happened early in the episode, because if this was anywhere else, it would have just been a real big speed bump, right?
For sure.
So next we go to Winterfell, and we go to the north and we see that Bran has been given a nice new wheelchair, which is a huge upgrade over the toboggan he had earlier, which, speaking of, Luke Hutchinson emails into towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com to say, I cannot speak for all 50 kingdoms. I think he means the 50 states. I like the little play on words there. Well done, Luke. But in Washington, at least, a toboggan refers to a kind of sled. We don't say toque, but usually refer to circular knit caps as beanies. Okay, so you think, well, that should clear that up, right? No, wrong. Okay, because Daniel Surratt also emailed in from North Carolina saying toboggans are indeed knit caps, and believe it or not, it does get cold enough here in February and March to actually use them.
Crazy.
What you call toboggan, we call a sled. Thanks for the great shows. So there you have it. Everyone outside of Canada is clearly using the wrong words for stuff, including Chesterfield, which is obviously a couch. And I think nothing makes sense. The world's all topsy-turvy, and I don't understand how a toboggan could be a hat.
That's crazy. But shout out to North Carolina. They're holding it down. We have a bunch of fans in North Carolina.
Do you think they have like meetups? If you don't, you should. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, Littlefinger. He comes to chat with Bran and tries to win him over by giving him a dagger, right? And a couple things, I guess, as far as the dagger is concerned, right? Let me just quickly take you through a history of this dagger, all right? First, an unnamed assassin used it to nearly kill Bran. Then, Catelyn brought the dagger to King's Landing, where Littlefinger said he once owned it. Yet Littlefinger claimed he lost it to Tyrion in a bet, something that apparently wasn't true. Littlefinger reclaimed the dagger after Ned was arrested and has held it until now. Now, the dagger is Valyrian steel and is very similar, if not the exact same dagger that we saw in the book Samwell was reading earlier this season. All right, that's a lot of history for an item that's been on screen for probably less than 5 minutes. Needless to say, I think it's going to become important. Again, I mean, Bran asked Littlefinger if he knows who the dagger belonged to. Clearly, Bran knows, and now I really want to know. Who do you think he's referring to?
That's a really tough question. I have no idea. I think it's clear that Cersei hired the cat's paw to kill Bran. That's pretty straightforward. Where he got the dagger from, however, is a bit harder to answer.
So, okay, hold on. So is the assassin is called the cat's paw? Because I thought the actual dagger was called the cat's paw.
No. The assassin's called the cat's paw. And that's just like a Westerosi term. That's like in genre or whatever. In world vernacular for an assassin. Cat's paw.
A cat's paw is an assassin?
Yeah.
That's super lame.
Well,
assassin is such a cooler word than cat's paw. Anyway.
So I think... Cersei's the one who would have had that done because it's so clunky. It wasn't exactly well hidden, and she's the only one who really cared about Bran waking up and revealing her secret to everyone, right? Tyrion has no reason to kill him.
So what did Littlefinger gain by telling just the whole chaos is a ladder thing by telling her Catelyn that he lost it to Tyrion? Is that the idea?
I guess so. That's
again, it's not clear either.
Well, it's been made clear in previous seasons that Littlefinger has sort of been the puppet master. He's been kind of stringing things along this whole time. Mm-hmm. So even as early as season 1 or even previous to season 1, he's been, he convinced Lysa Arryn to murder her husband, Jon Arryn. And that's another one of those events that kind of set things in motion. So it's conceivable that Littlefinger was pitting the Starks against the Lannisters from the get-go. Not even because it's probable.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's hard to track a lot of what Littlefinger does because it's very much a web, right? Mm-hmm. And he talks about all the time, fighting all the battles all the time. He's got his fingers in a lot of things, so it's not always easy to track what's exactly happening with that, right? But that being said, like what you just said makes the most sense as far as how that tracks. As far as the actual dagger is concerned,
that's still a mystery.
Nothing out of what I just read or what you went over really explains who did it, do you know who it belonged to, which was what Bran asked Littlefinger. It's super vague. It's not who knows.
So the only information that we get from our end is that it belonged to Littlefinger. So he could have lent it to Cersei if he was if he was trying to pit the Starks against the Lannisters. That seems a little heavy-handed for him, though. That's a bit too obvious, right?
Well, maybe he did actually lose it in a bet. To Tyrion, and then
but I feel like Tyrion denied that, and he also has no reason to lie.
Yeah, that's true.
He would have if he knew that Cersei was up to something, he would have messed up her plans just for the sake of doing so, right? I don't know,
but it's not okay. So, secondly, to that whole thing, as Sansa mentions later, what is Littlefinger's goal by giving Bran the dagger? Right? Is it just to get in good graces with Bran, try to endear him a little bit, or what's the goal there? What's he trying to accomplish? Even having this conversation.
No, of course, yeah. I mean, it definitely feels like a symbolic gesture. I can't imagine what symbolism lies therein for Littlefinger. Like, it doesn't really
it's
benefit
all so
him.
vague. All this whole thing is it's also like hazy to me. Everything that's happening with Bran right now is very
and Bran is not helping whatsoever in clearing that up.
They called it in the recap that I read at EW. They called him at one point. I think when he's talking about like so Sansa and Arya go to interface with BranBot 3000.
That's pretty funny.
Which I thought was I chuckled out loud. Chuckled out loud, by the way. COL. It's the different of LOL. It's a little different. Mm-hmm. It's a variant.
Underused.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, no, Littlefinger giving him the dagger. Like you could maybe try to argue that it was an intimidation tactic.
Sure.
Again, that's Littlefinger, showing his hand too early, and that's not really within his character. He's not the type to just walk up and be like, I tried to kill you with this dagger, so mind you, like, you watch your back, sort of thing.
Right. Plus, I don't think here's the other question, right? Is whatever his original plan was, how much has it changed after Bran drops the whole chaos as a ladder line on him, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a bomb, comes out of left field for him, as a side note, by the way, the second that Littlefinger said the word chaos in that little sentence he was saying, my mind instantly went to that line, and my mind was literally blown when Bran said it 3 seconds later.
Even though it went there.
Yeah, because it was like, so I'm like, yeah, chaos is a ladder. Yeah, that's what he said that one time. What a cool line. And then Bran's like, yeah, because chaos is a ladder. I was like, whoa. You imagine that gif of those people like with their like going around that one guy with like that hands on his face and like, yeah. That's basically how I felt at that moment.
All right.
What do you think?
It's hard to say. I'm sorry, I don't have a beat on that dagger or what to think about it. I'm honestly maybe not more interested because that's a mystery, but I'm as interested in the look that Bran gave Arya while he handed her the dagger.
Is Bran capable of giving anyone a look?
It really, that's what it felt like to me. I know, and that's what's weird. It's very subtle, but he seemed almost like he seemed unemotional. Right, stoic, just stone faced, like we've said before.
Like
right? Exactly, detached. He seemed kind of sad when he was giving it to Arya, like almost as if he knew what this meant for her, whatever her future holds for her.
Like, I don't know. You say that, but we're going to get to a moment later, and I guess we can talk about it now, since we're on the subject. But in that same scene later, and again, we'll talk more deeply about that. But he makes a line where saying, "Hey, I saw you at the crossroads talking to Arya," and he says then right after, I thought you might go to King's Landing. And I think it's a one line, and I think it's a huge line because it proves that he can't see the future. Because if he saw her at the crossroads and knew she was coming to King's Landing, that's a whole different thing, right? He didn't know that was going to happen. So I think that's important when you say like when you hand something like Arya the dagger, I don't think he knows what that means and like literally knows it. He might have an idea or something. Sure. I don't think he literally knows it.
I don't know. That's a fair point. Like, he doesn't know the future. He probably knows futures, possible futures,
you think?
or branches thereof. Right. Again, all this stuff with Bran it's hard to really put a beat on it. It's hard to say because they haven't explicitly said what exactly his power set is.
That's the closest thing I've got to weconfirmation that he can't see the future. I picked up on that, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. And until he says, like, I know this is going to happen or I know that's going to happen, we've seen him see things that are happening now. We've seen him see things that happened in the past. Mm-hmm. We've never seen him actually witness the future. Right?
That's a good point. And my impression is that a lot of that power comes from the weirwood trees. It comes from the idea is like it's the power of the old gods. So they're witnessing things. It's not about telling the future. It's about seeing through their eyes, per se. So that makes sense.
Okay. So let's get to the scene with Mira and Bran. This is technically the same scene as the Littlefinger one, but two of them are interrupted by Mira. She comes in and she's here to say goodbye. She tells them that she needs to be with her family when all this White Walker shit goes down. But Bran, who is now fully in robot mode, is as cold as ever, right? She's understandably pissed about this after everything she's been through with him, right? It's like, it's nice to have... Like, it just drives me nuts. It's nice to have someone actually call him on his shit, Mm-hmm. And she reminds him that her brother, Hodor, Summer all died so that he could be here, right? And all he has to say is a thank you. You know, it's like it feels, and not even like a genuine thank you, just like a, you know, like it's kind of like the same way you say thank you to someone who gives you your coffee in the morning. You know, like yeah, although that's probably more sincere. You know, so there's two things I feel about this. There's a chance that this is the last time we see Mira. People have been tossing that around. Is this the last time we see her now that the show has quote unquote served its purpose? She's, you know, you don't need her to move them around anymore, that kind of stuff. I would remind people that her dad might still be important.
That's right? All I'm waiting for. You have to see Howland Reed eventually in this series.
Right. So I don't know if there's a guarantee, especially like you said, with only 10 episodes left. There's no guarantees. I'm on the fence about it, but I'm not like resigned to the fact that that's the last scene we saw with her. If it is, it's a pretty bitter, sweet ending. I don't know, final moment to a character.
It's not even sweet; it's just bitter.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I mean, it's bitter. It's only sweet in the sense in comparison to the rest of the show, where most of the time, the last time we see someone, they're dying. So, if you know what I mean, right? I do. Anything else you want to mention about Mira and Bran?
I completely forgot about that scene.
Okay, that's clearly left a mark. Clearly left a mark. Well, the next one is important. So Arya arrives at Winterfell, and we see this nice, gorgeous shot of a snowy Winterfell as she arrives over a hill on her white horse. And this is just one of a few stunning vistas we get to see in this episode. They've really been spending their money on those big castle shots and like landscapes. It's really nice, actually. It helps build the world. And I mentioned earlier that I appreciate the show taking time to give us a pause from the nonstop pace we've gotten this season for some slower scenes. And this is another one of them. And I actually really enjoyed the two Winterfell guards. I thought they were actually like genuinely funny. This whole scene I thought was genuinely funny. And it was a nice break from what is generally just all seriousness all the time.
Definitely.
Right?
It's one of those scenes like you said, it's a change of pace. It slows it down, but it didn't feel like it was dragging on. I didn't feel like I was like, okay, let's go, let's move along. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It all felt, you know, true to the world. Like, of course, you know, and they're not going to believe her, right? They obviously, it's understandable for them to question that she's actually Arya. You know, she's believed to be dead. No one's seen her in years. Like, there really is no reason to believe her, but she does casually explain that Winterfell is her home, convinces them to at least tell Sansa. She then pulls a Batman and just disappears while the two aren't looking. And the two guards go tell Sansa. Also another really quick scene. And then she just like, oh, I know where she is. And they go down to the crypt. So the two, Sansa and Arya, meet in the crypt and give each other a nice hug. You know, and here's the thing. I was surprisingly moved by this reunion because, you know, I didn't have as much invested in their relationship, especially because they didn't really like each other. Than some of the other
only adds
characters.
to it. They had that whole like rivalry or whatever, like the big sister bullying the little sister. But then after all the shit that they've been through, when they finally get back together, it hits home.
That's right, and like obviously, and you really feel it too. You know, like the weight coming off of Arya's shoulders a bit when they have that nice hug, and it did hit home for me. It actually worked. Is what I'm trying to get at. Even though I wasn't expecting
seeing Arya smile like that for the first time in a long time, it feels like.
Yeah, because she felt almost Bran-like when she was talking to Hot Pie not that long ago. She's like, hello, Hot Pie. Like, it's just like, there's the most detached, right? So they talk about how the statue of Ned doesn't really look like him. And then they have a nice little exchange about how they got here that ends with the line, you know, our stories aren't over yet, which I think is poignant, right? And I really like that. It's just their whole conversation is just, it makes sense, right? He's like, do I have to call you Lady Stark, right? I like that she says yes, by the way, which is funny. And then Arya briefly mentions her death list. Sansa thinks she's just joking. Then they have a nice awkward laugh, you know, and awkwardness or not, it's nice seeing Arya laugh. You know, like you said, it's nice to see her smile, which we don't see very often.
Although Sansa gives her a weird look, like when Sansa realizes that it's no longer a joke, and later on, Sansa's kind of weird about Arya.
Yeah, I mean, fair.
It's weird for your little sister to come home saying she's gonna murder people, and then maniacally laughing about it. That's understandable.
You know, this scene, and then later on with Brienne, which is coming up, it's crazy how short Maisie Williams is compared to the rest of like the main cast, especially Winterfell. Well,
especially Brienne.
Yeah, Brienne is really
Gwendolyn
tall.
Christie.
And exactly. And so is, and like, I don't know if maybe they want to make Sansa appear taller, but I think she's fairly tall as well, right? It really stuck out because she really, it made more sense back and she's like, yeah, she's the little sister, whatever. But now that they're all grown up, she's still super short, you know? It's like, it's just so much more jarring. Mm-hmm. And it obviously has no impact on anything. That's something I had noticed. Anything else you want to mention about Sansa and Arya meeting for the first time? Yes, Arya.
Is that our shorthand for Sansa and Arya now?
It's the shipping. For those who are shipping Sansa and
Arya.
Those people are the worst, by the way.
That's no good.
Yeah, so...
I don't know.
Anything else you want to say about
that? It's always great to see the Stark kids get back together. I know you said the one with Bran didn't feel very, impactful because he is still so detached. He barely moved when Sansa hugged him, right?
You don't think he even he didn't even raise his arm to hug her back.
Yeah,
which is,
and he's capable of doing that. His legs don't work, but his arms sure do.
Yeah, you know how you know. He gives Arya a hug in this exact episode.
Oh damn!
Yeah, he's throwing shade.
I love that theme. I love when the music kicks in as the Stark kids all come back to their ancestral home. Having them meet in front of Ned's statue is perfect. Again, like I said the other episode, anytime someone's there, I picture Ned watching them and approving of what they're doing. So that's awesome.
Just standing with his arms crossed, nodding his head.
Exactly.
Sean Beaning.
Like that moment when they say, we've been through all this shit, but our stories aren't over. Like the fact that they can keep and maintain that perspective, keep and maintain being the same thing, by the way. It's
best to not point out those kinds of things. Just move on.
I know. I caught myself. But the fact that they have that perspective, I think Ned Stark or any father would approve of that. So that's awesome. It's
like Sansa always says, to be able to look, step outside yourself, so you don't make the same errors that Ned did, right? Mm-hmm. Which is nice. So Sansa and Arya and Bran have a nice little meeting. Like I said, go interface with Branbot 3000. The two girls go to meet Bran, and it almost blew my mind seeing three Starks on the screen at the same time. This late in the series, almost right. Bran is as warm as ever. He's hanging out by the weirwood tree. He gives Arya a hug, like I mentioned, and then he tells her that he saw her at the crossroads. She's obviously shocked. Sansa gives literally a one-line explanation that says, he has visions, and then I'm shocked because I'm just like, it's amazing how cool everyone is with his abilities.
Oh yeah, he has visions now.
Yeah, he's always kind of the weird one, right? And then, like you said, he mentions that she thought she might go to King's Landing, and we talked about that. That I think it confirms that he can't see the future.
Excuse me.
He also mentions that Cersei is on Arya's kill list. Sansa is surprised because she thought that was a joke, and then asks who else is on her list. I got the impression that she was worried that she had Sansa on her list, which I thought was kind of cute.
That's pretty funny, actually. My cousin texted me about that. It's like after this episode, she was really pumped or whatever. She's like, "This is epic! I can't wait to hear it." Blah blah blah. And then she's like, "Is Sansa on Arya's list?" She was genuinely concerned that Sansa.
Yeah, was so was Sansa. She's like, "I know I wasn't nice to her, but do you think she has me on her
I know I made fun of your knitting, but come on, I'm still your sister." No, I feel like if I remember correctly, at this point, Cersei and the Mountain are the only ones left on Arya's list. I feel like everyone else has been killed. And Jaime was never on the list.
Most of them are dead already. Sorry? She doesn't even answer it. She just just most of them are dead already.
Yeah. And the Hound gets a pass.
Yeah.
Because he was on the list.
Yeah. He community service.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Time served.
Yeah. So next we have Arya and Brienne. And the next time we see Arya, it's after this courtyard scene, but she is looking nicely cleaned up, like she had a bath, perhaps. She's rocking her sword, her nice new dagger, and she's got a pretty cool outfit on. She looked good in her new Stark digs, right? And Pod and Brienne are training, and I just get the impression that Pod has not improved at all in his combat skills, at all. Like, I don't. Every time we see these two, he's just getting his ass kicked over and over and over again, right?
I mean, I'm sure he's improved, but just nothing compared to Brienne. I think that's what we're supposed to think about that.
So Arya challenges Brienne to spar. Now, remember, these two haven't seen each other since Brienne and the Hound fought way back in, season 4? So it's nice to see these characters back together. And this is a favorite scene among many Game of Thrones fans. Many people picked it as their favorite scene of this episode, even with the battle that happened at the end of the episode. And I definitely enjoyed it, but I also want to mention something that was brought up in the recap that I mentioned earlier that I totally agree with. So basically, James Hibbert, who writes the recap, mentions that Game of Thrones producer Brian Cogman once talked about the challenge of reuniting lost characters, specifically on this show. Cogman says, it's tempting to have the characters just recap everything that they've been through. You know, like, oh, I did this and I did this. Isn't it cool when this thing happened, right? But he points out that that isn't necessarily interesting because it's just telling the audience stuff that they already know, you know?
Yeah.
So basically, this whole scene is the filmmaker's mantra of show, don't tell, of Arya explaining what she's been through since they last met without saying a single word about it, right? Which I think is pretty cool. And I thought that was cool that they brought that up. So it is really cool, not to mention the choreography itself of the sparring is really cool, but just seeing Arya's skills without like the risk of her actually dying, which is a nice change, right? So what do you think of this whole bit?
Of course, I mean it's hard to. It's impressive how much she's advanced, even though ostensibly she didn't finish her training. We can all agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, he did say at the end, Jack and Gar did say, now she's no one, right? So,
and does she not say that in this? She meant to mention that at some point in this episode.
No, she says like, "Where did you learn this?" or "Who taught you this?"
Yeah, and she says no one.
She says no one.
Yeah. I don't know. I just like that from like Arya is at this point where she's just a fighter. She's just again trying to accomplish her list or cross names off her list rather. So Brienne beat the best fighter she's ever known. So she wants to fight her. I love that. Mm-hmm. But I also don't really. I don't like it. It was fun and all. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but I don't need to see more of that.
What do you mean? So you didn't like the scene?
I didn't find it too terribly interesting.
Oh, okay.
No,
I think it's just a lot. It's a kind of a fun, what do you call it? It's just give. It's like a throw a bone to the fans. Like
sure,
it's just really cool.
I think they are each fan favorites in their own right.
Yeah. Fan service is the word I was looking for, by the way. I don't know why I couldn't think of that.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's a tough one.
Shut up, Daniel. And then we also get to see Sansa and Littlefinger watch. But Sansa in particular, her jaw is on the floor as this whole thing is happening. Like her mouth is agape, and I just want to mention that's like the whole ability to sword fight with one hand behind your back is like one of the most badass ways to sword fight. Can we agree on that at least?
I don't know about that. Well, yeah, sure, fair enough. We can agree that it's cool. The Bravos are. It's a completely different type of sword fighting. It's not seen in Westeros. So.
It's more like
fencing.
Fencing, yeah.
Yeah.
She even like pulls a fencing move on her.
It's all about speed and precision versus brute strength. Although I don't know that it would be terribly effective against plate armor.
Yeah, especially because like the side of her sword or like the edges of her sword are dulled, right? Like it's just a point, right?
That's how fencing works. It's more about stabs than slashes.
Right.
I don't know. I think needle is sharp on the sides too. I think she could slash with needle.
That's not clear to me. I don't think so.
It's not going to get a lot of close-ups. But it is, I don't know. That's the impression I get, is that it's just when Jon has it forged he doesn't have it forged because they wouldn't be able to make a Bravo sword. They wouldn't be able to make an épée, I think they're called, or a saber. They're called both those things. So it's castle forged steel, and it's just a smaller version of a sword, is the impression I get.
So, did you, when she did like the flippy thing with her, the technical term, the flippy thing with the dagger?
I'm familiar.
Yeah. Did you have a flashback to Chronicles of Riddick? Because I certainly did. I just, I was just waiting for her to drop the line. It's like, oh, it's a quarter ounce heavy on the blade side or something, right?
Or, yeah, you want to play a game, who's the better killer?
Yeah, right? Either one of those works. And she's actually a lot, now that I mention it, her character is actually a lot like the character, like the female character in Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah, Kira.
Right? Is that, oh yeah.
Kira!
Right. Get your ass moving! They have actually a lot of like similarities as far as characterization is concerned, but this isn't the Chronicles of Riddick podcast, so won't linger on that.
Yeah, but you're right. She is a little kid that was like a little girl that wanted to, sword fight and adventure, not knit and play music or whatever.
Right.
And then that led her down a path to becoming a crazy assassin. It's actually a pretty apt analogy.
Yeah. What does she say in that moment? Now I'm just thinking about Chronicles of Riddick. What does she say in that moment? She's like, where do you go to get, when she talks about like getting her eyes polished
So
or whatever?
how do I get eyes like that?
Yeah.
And then you got to kill a few people.
Yeah.
And then you got to go to a slammer where they tell you never see the light of day. And you pay a doctor, I don't know what the term, like 50, whatever currency they have to give you an eye job. I think that's what they call it or something like that.
It's still pretty cool though. Yeah. Anywho, here's the thing. If you don't love Chronicles of Riddick, like I do, I think you're wrong. You're entitled to your opinion, but I believe it's wrong.
Pitch Black is better.
I disagree. Anyway, when it's all over, Arya looks up to see that Sansa has actually left. She stopped watching. So, what do you think this means? What do you think that means in particular? Like, what's Sansa thinking? What's Arya thinking? Basically, Sansa's reactions to Arya through this whole episode are really subtle and hard, like not super easy to read, right? But there's something clearly, the gears are turning there in some way. Why would she walk away? Why would she stop?
Well,
Arya in some ways showing off, right?
And the music definitely kind of gets a bit more ominous in these moments. I can't think of a reason Sansa would, would be unhappy to see her sister capable of defending herself, right? It's not like she's trying to take over Winterfell. It doesn't affect Sansa strategically whatsoever. It does affect Littlefinger, and I think they kind of focus on him. I think we had an email. I want to say
you can hear birds chirping when they look at him, which I don't know. If they're trying to like allude to ravens or whatever, it's a little heavy-handed,
maybe.
Either way, I think the whole idea of introducing bird chirps in the background of watching Littlefinger's face as he smirks, because I'm pretty sure every sentence he ever says ends with a smirk, is just, again, a little on the nose. So I
feel like he wasn't smirking here. He saw Arya training, and then he saw the dagger, and he was like, "Oh shit!" And it wasn't chirping; it was cawing. And I believe it was Tom from Japan that sent us an email about that. I could be wrong though, so don't.
Either way, we have a listener in Japan, and that's pretty
that's
cool.
insane, right?
And then I saw your reply. It was like the most international, which I know you even addressed it in the next sentence, but that's for sure not a unit of measurement.
No, there's no such. What is the most international? He's just from far away.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I was really excited. Dude's from Japan.
Japan. That's how they say it in Street Fighter. Yeah. Japan. USSR.
Thailand.
Is that how they say it? Thailand too?
Yeah.
Great. So I think on that note, unless you have anything else you want to mention about... I think, okay, I'll mention... I should give my take. I think Sansa might be... Not so much... I think you said worried or something. I don't know if that's... I think she's just more...
She's definitely shocked.
Shocked. I think she's just like, who is this person? That's the kind of question. Like, I left and it was one way. She kind of, right away is kind of apprehensive about the way she treated her right from the get-go, right? But I think when she looks at this now, like, she's like, she's just not the same person that she was when I left, right?
But I don't think we need to read too far into that. Like, that's not going to change their that hug that they had and their characters going forward.
Right. I think you need to be, like you said, be more concerned about whatever's happening with Littlefinger. There's someone who tweeted me, I don't have their stuff on top of my head, basically asking, what do you think the chances he survives to the end of the season? I think the chances are pretty good. I think he survives at least like till the end of the show, potentially even. He's a pretty clever guy, right? Of course,
he's a
Bran
survivor.
doesn't help that, right? that whole thing, because if Sansa ever found out that he was the one that betrayed Ned, that's not good. That is not good for Littlefinger, which is why I'm concerned for Bran, and we talked about this last week, right? And his safety. But at the same time, with everything he knows, he doesn't seem so concerned about it, right? Which kind of, although it's hard to read anything he says, so I'm not as worried, right?
But again, if he can't see the future, who knows? It is, to be clear, Bran's power, ostensibly, he can see the present and like anywhere, anytime, or not anytime, rather, anywhere at this present moment,
right?
So, which is almost as good as seeing the future.
Yeah, because you could know what everyone's planning.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's fair to be concerned for Bran. I think Littlefinger, is going to be kind of the main focus enemy of next season after the White Walkers are dealt with, potentially. I'm not saying they'll be dealt with this season. I'm thinking they're going to be a major part of next season, but so will he. I think we lose Cersei this season, and he's the next human bad guy, if we're speaking under like conventional storytelling tropes.
Yeah, sure, but what would be, from what perspective? Why pitted against who?
I imagine he's still going to be, kind of playing both sides. He's going to be pitting, unfortunately, the Stark children, the remaining Starks, against each other. We've seen, it's been leading up to this for a little while. We've talked about the schism between Jon and Sansa. We're seeing these like minor little rifts between,
although at the same
like
time,
you said, Arya and Sansa.
Sansa does say, she's mentioned now like twice since Jon's left, I hope Jon comes back soon.
Yeah, but she also, as soon as Bran got back, she said, "You're the Lord of Winterfell. This should be you."
Right, that's true.
It's important to note that Sansa still recognizes that Jon's a bastard. He has no right to this throne, and if push came to shove, she would, push Jon out to make Bran Lord of Winterfell, and that would lead to civil war in the north, potentially, right?
Uh-huh. Which would, again, more chaos.
Which is where some people thrive.
Mm-hmm. Those parties being left unnamed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now is as good a time as any to thank some people. Now we are running a GoFundMe campaign, a crowdfunding campaign to reach $1,000 Canadian for the end of the season. To help defer the costs of running the show, we put a lot of work into it, and it's just a nice way to help give back to the work that we put in. And it's just hugely appreciated that people have given anything. And we've reached over half of our funding goal so far, and it's awesome.
Yes, thanks a lot, guys.
That final goal of $1,000 was to help reach that bonus episode, to guarantee that bonus episode, right? Now, because, like I said at the top of the show, we managed to grab a sponsor this season, so that bonus episode is now guaranteed, but we would still love to reach that funding goal. So, of course, the best way to do that is to go over to towerbabble.ca/donate, and there's a portal there through Stripe that will allow you to donate to us. Now, I suggest going there instead of the GoFundMe page, which is gofundme.com/GOT Season 7. And there's only one reason for this. It's because when trying to pay through Stripe, if your card is denied for whatever reason, it will tell you, and you can try again or try to use a different card. In GoFundMe, if you try a card and it's denied for, again, whatever reason, it does not tell you. The donation says, hey, well, you got a new donation. Everyone feels happy, and then like 3 days later, it bounces or whatever. So if you're, I'm not saying unsure or whatever, but if you just want to make sure that it's going through, absolutely, just use the Stripe portal, and I'll add it to our GoFundMe campaign manually, which I have been doing. Of course, $10, donation of $10 gets you into our Slack group, which we've been having a great discussion so far.
It's been blowing up lately.
It's been really fun. I'm talking Game of Thrones. And if you want to be a part of that, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well, but mostly Game of Thrones, head over to, like I said, our website, towerbabble.ca/donate. Donate $10 and you get, or minimum $10, and you get into the Slack group. All right, Dan, so we have 7 people we'd like to thank, and I think it would be most appropriate if you explained how this is all going down.
So we got a very generous donation from, and these are all $5 increments, my sister Michelle D'Souza, her boyfriend Kevin McWha, and their 5 children, none of whom own a credit card, none of whom have a bank account as far as I know.
But Daniel, can I just put this out there? I think they might be a part of the reason that they cracked down on our GoFundMe campaign, because we got a bunch of donations from the same credit card with different names.
It makes a lot of sense.
And that, I think, is what part of the reason. So if anyone their payment didn't go through, I'm not saying blame anyone, just blame GoFundMe, really. But it's possible that this is where that stemmed from. But
you can also blame Michelle. I have no problem with that.
I didn't think you would.
So yeah, Michelle, Kevin, and then their 5 children in order. My niece Kailey, my nephew Ty, my nephew Tommy, and then the twins Brooke and Leah, all donated $5. Thanks. And also, by the way, none of them are old enough to watch Game of Thrones or listen to this podcast.
Yeah, but then if they were, they would, right?
I don't know. I don't know if I would want them to.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, huge thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Obviously, there's still time for you to donate. We're doing 7 now, and that's kind of to break it down. 6-7 people a week. If you donated by the end of the season, you don't hear your name for some reason. That's a huge oversight on our part. Let us know. So far, I've been doing, I feel like, a pretty good job keeping track. So,
and we are going chronologically. That's why you haven't heard your name yet.
Right. So as we get further down, the more recent donations.
Also, those of you who donated $50 get those AMAs in.
Yep. Yeah, please. And we'll do that in the bonus episode, by the way. All right. So let's move on to Dragonstone. So Jon and Dany have another conversation, and I'm so glad we get to see another Jon and Dany scene this week, because as many as possible that we can get, I'm grateful for. More, please, is basically what I'm saying. And before we go any further, I just want to say that this episode did a lot to convince me that a Jon and Dany marriage might be a good idea. And on the face of it, yeah, I'm kind of weirded out about them being related. But at the same time, if they don't know, I'm a lot more cool with it.
That's a weird way to justify it.
I don't know. But also, listen, I'm going to go through. There's a couple different things that help me come to this conclusion. And I'm not fully on board yet, but I'm much more further on that side than I was before. And I'll go through them as we get to them.
Sure.
Right? But they do have amazing on-screen chemistry. Just put it that way. They do have a really good on-screen chemistry, and that's clear now in the last week and this week. So that's beyond the whole practical standpoint from in-show stuff, but their chemistry is pretty good. Okay. So Jon takes Dany to a cave to show her the dragon glass before they start mining it, and I would be remiss to mention the last time Jon was in a cave with a young lady, but I won't get into it.
Oh, right? Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Right, man?
Yeah.
Winky wink, right? Nudge, nudge. Anyway, Jon then shows Dany some cave paintings. The show, the children of the men, the first men having worked together to stop the White Walkers. It's a very convenient tool to help you, to help Jon, at least in this case, convince Dany that it's a real issue, right? Besides the fact that it does look pretty cool, the arc is pretty cool. I think a couple of people on Twitter they're like, yep, that's tattoo-worthy stuff right there. I wouldn't go that far, but
you could probably find a better way to tattoo to show you're a fan of the show than to tattoo those.
Well, just better, Game of Thrones stuff that you could put any of the sigils probably,
and also those look like they were drawn with crayon. So, don't put that on your body.
So here's the thing, Dan. we were talking about crazy theories earlier. There's a theory going around that Jon actually just drew all that stuff on the wall.
No, there's not. Come on.
Yeah, it's really. I'm not sure how serious it is. But I think it's hilarious. I love the idea. I just love thinking about the idea that he went in there and he's like, okay, how do I convince her that this is a real issue? Okay, pulls out a marker, draws all the stuff on the wall. It's sees look, the children of the forest, right? The first men, we know who these are, right? Let's not get into it, but listen, they work together.
It is pretty funny how easily Dany's convinced by that, having given him a bunch of time alone in a cave. I can see the logic at least. For
I think it's clearly not true, but it's a funny thing to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so the two of them then have another political discussion where Dany again tells Jon to bend the knee. She makes a comment about the survival of the North being more important than his pride. And that one seems to hit home a bit for him, right? And this is where I started to come around to the idea of their marriage. It was this moment, all right? because from a political standpoint, it joins their two armies together without anyone having to bend the knee, right? It solves that problem right away, right? Mm-hmm. It also combines their problems into one problem, which isn't necessarily, better, but at the same time, that doesn't really change anything. The problems still exist regardless, right? The only issue I see in this at this point is it's actually her pride that would get in the way of anything like that, right?
Her pride and the fact that she doesn't think she'll ever love someone again and has, no interest in marriage.
To be fair, and I think I mentioned this earlier or later on when there's the Davos scene, but last season when she leaves her little lover behind, Dario, right? She says, listen, I can't bring you with me. She unburdened herself by saying, there's a chance that I need to marry someone to create alliances, right?
Yeah, and that's what she was doing with Hizdar Zolarak, right? She married a Marine to appease the nobles.
Right. So, in this case, and they wouldn't just say that kind of thing at the end of last season. It might, right? It's like, oh, just in case, whatever, I might need to get married. But, we've been talking about the idea of alliances, as a through line this entire season, right? And this is the biggest of all those alliances. And she always says, what's the best way? I think in that scene last season, she's like, what's the best way to make alliances? Through marriage, right?
Yeah, it's been done before. It's been done for hundreds of years.
Right? It would join the Targaryens and the Starks together. And even though that's how, Jon came to be, but just putting that all aside, it just makes sense from a political standpoint, right?
From a strategic standpoint, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that was the first point at that point, because they keep driving home bend the knee. It's like that solves that problem right there. Plus the stuff that she said in the last season, right? So that's the first one. Okay.
So then they're equals, yeah.
See if I can't convince you or pull you over to my side a little bit more as we keep talking here. But before we go on, I should mention there's another possible solution, and it was emailed in by Jonah Jonah Pajek. That's what I'm going to go with. From Maryville, Tennessee. And he writes, why have neither Jon nor Dany, two of the greatest leaders in Westeros, thought to enter a mutually beneficial partnership? One in which Jon doesn't need to bend the knee, but he also helps facilitate the overthrow of the Lannisters. We know pacts like this exist in the Game of Thrones universe. He mentions in parentheses here, the children of the children of the forest and the first men come to mind with their partnership on the God's Eye. Mm-hmm. Is that what that painting though? Is that literally what he's talking about there in the cave, or was that something else?
Well, the God's Eye is a little island near Harrenhal, which is where they made that pact. But it essentially means a peace between the children of the forest and the first men. But we've learned later on that the reason that happened was to defend against the White Walkers.
Right. Okay.
So they had their backs against the wall, and they had to be. They had no other choice.
Right.
Which is where Jon and Dany aren't at that desperation point yet. Jon is because he knows the true enemy, but Daenerys hasn't seen it yet, so she's not ready to commit to that. I think if the White Walkers were to come, maybe we'd reach that point.
Yeah. So obviously, I know these. And he even says here, I know different circumstances, but neither had to bend the knee, and the children were significantly weaker than the first men at that point, like Jon is to Dany. So, why can't Jon offer southern parts of the north as a staging ground for Dany's army without sending his own men? I'm just going to jump in here and say she actually has a pretty good staging ground in Dragonstone already.
Yeah.
So that, just mention that. But he also goes on saying that would also put Jon in good favor with Dany, and after she finishes off the Lannisters, which she has just shown she can do quite easily, she could help the North. Or at least give them the dragon glass from Dragonstone. So what do you think of that?
Of course, it makes a lot of sense from our perspective, right? It's easy for us to say that. Unfortunately, like you said earlier, it is a pride issue for both of them. Or even, they're honor bound not to do that kind of thing.
Although, don't you get the impression that Jon isn't so necessarily worried? Like she says, Danny mentioned his pride, but I don't get the sense that he's prideful in
No,
the
no, no.
sense of being king.
I remember a couple episodes. I remember saying like Jon he wouldn't care. He would bend the knee in a second if it helped him in the north.
Right.
However, it would cost him the loyalty of all the northern lords. That's why he knows he can't do it.
Yeah,
they've trusted him, like he says a million times. They've trusted me to lead the north. It looks bad for him to come south and then just bend to some foreign ruler that they've never met. So it has to stay with him. The power has to stay with him. Their trust.
What would they say if he came back married?
No. Honestly, marriage is a different story, and that's a large part of Westerosi history. Is these past.
So you think they'd be cool with it? The Northern Lords, they'd be like, all right, so we don't have to bend the knee. We're everyone's cool with this, like that whole idea.
I think there would be a little friction, but not as much as if you bent the knee. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that. I'll buy that.
Especially because you would have Daenerys coming north with her dragons to talk to them. You know, like it wouldn't just be some foreign ruler invading and conquering. Right. It would, we all have common enemies. Mm-hmm. And as much as Jon, keeps telling everybody about the White Walkers, a lot of the Northern Lords are still concerned with what's going on in the South. You would have to believe that, right?
Well, especially the ones that are closer to the South.
And that's the thing about giving them southern regions. The southern region of the North would be the Neck, which is home to Howland Reed. And we haven't seen him yet. He can't just give that shit away.
Okay.
You kind of have to talk to that guy first. Him, and we also haven't really seen the Manderleys, although they've been mentioned, but they're the southernmost most of the Northern Lords.
Have you seen Lord Manderley?
I don't think so. I know they were mentioned last season.
That name comes up.
I feel like last season there were three that were named. It was the Karstarks, the Manderleys, and the Umbers. And the Karstarks and the Umbers betrayed Jon in the north, and that was the whole Battle of the Bastard things. I don't know what became of the Manderleys, but they weren't a part of that. But I don't remember ever seeing Lord Manderley.
Okay.
If we have, he's supposed to be really fat, like a beast, like a walrus.
Yeah, I don't know if they went that route. Anyway, so Jon and Dany leave the cave, and they receive some bad news about the Unsullied at Casterly Rock. That they found out basically what we knew last week. That now they are stuck in that side of they're stuck all the way on the other side of the continent with no food. Right?
It's unclear to me if they're stuck because they're only besieged from the sea.
Right. So they mentioned, I think, in I don't know who says it, but I think it might have been Jaime. But basically saying that they're forced now to march across the continent.
Yes, and they have no supplies because they emptied Casterly Rock of any supplies they would have had. Right.
Which is just as bad because the supply issue of an army is just as important as any other. Like logistics of like feeding an army is so important, and they don't
especially when they're on the other side of the world with no through routes.
And obviously, they don't get into that kind of stuff very much in the show, but it still plays a role. Anyway, so Dany's temper kind of flares up. She's been known to do that. She can get a little angry from time to time, and says she's just going to ride her dragons over to King's Landing and burn it all down. Right? Tyrion, I wrote Tyrion here by accident. Tyrion tries to talk her out of it. She questions his loyalty.
I love that moment because that's a lot of things. Like even like I had people talking to me about like, of course she's going to turn on Tyrion. I think it was one of my sisters that said this because it's his family, blah blah blah. Like, and they hadn't seen the episode yet, so I had to keep my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that makes the most sense. He could easily be the spy or be the mole, right?
I mean, at the same time, you just from what the show's
from her perspective,
reason to believe that. Yeah.
We don't believe that because we know him as a character, but from her perspective, of course, he's a liability.
Right. So anyway, she does that, and then surprising everyone, she asks Jon what he would do. Like, what do you think I should do? She says to Jon, which is surprising because he's not a part of her inner circle, right? Mm-hmm. And I love Varys kind of like looks like he throws shade a little bit too. He's like, excuse me, like you're asking him. And he gives this awesome. I basically what he says here is so awesome, right? He says. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He basically says that burning everything down is exactly what her ancestors did, and she wants to be different. And burning it all down is just more of the same, right? Which obviously hits home for her because it goes against her whole wheel and spoke analogy, right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was really thoughtful. It's also part two of why I think the marriage should work. Obviously, there's like a I don't know who mentioned it somewhere. It was like the whole fire and ice dynamic, where like her hot temper, right? And Jon has a bit of a temper too, but he's much more reserved, that kind of stuff.
That's a good point.
Right?
I hadn't thought about it in that sense, but yeah, he cools her down. He brings her down to earth, sort of thing.
So that also is another like, oh man, and also like again, their chemistry is just on point, right? It was just some real good counsel from him, right? So the next scene we get, Dan, do you have anything you want to? Sorry, I should mention. Is there anything else you want to mention about? We talked about that stuff for a while, but is there anything else?
Yeah, of course. I don't know. It's interesting that you mentioned Varys because she was at that point where she was about to, betray the people, like the point where Varys was expected to speak up, and she went to Jon instead, and he has the same sensibilities, so that's important.
She surrounds herself with people who have a heart, at least to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So Jon and Davos have a nice chat, and this scene takes place on that awesome staircase. And
you really love that staircase.
Man, it's a real world place. Like it's an actual staircase. I don't know how like big it is in real life. It's huge in real life, but it's not. I don't know if it's quite that big in real life, right? And I just think it's really cool. I think every shot that takes place there, it does really good world building because it feels real, right? It's like the opposite of the Star Wars prequels in the sense that these people are actually walking down the stairs. There's people with a steady cam following them in front of them, right? So you can see the camera moving down the stairs with them. It all feels so tangible. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Anyway, so anytime we get any scene on the staircase, I think it's a win, right? And obviously, the showrunners feel the same way because they keep putting scenes on it. And Davos grills Jon about having like a crush, and grills is a strong word, but having basically a crush on Dany, which is fair because if we can see...
Is that your third point in why you think they're going to get together? No,
I think that... let me get to there. Jon says he doesn't have... Anyway, so he says... Davos is... he's like, listen, you have a crush on her, and like I said, if we can see the chemistry, obviously they can kind of see the chemistry too, right, in world. So... And Davos has a point. Also, he does make that great joke about fewer, which is the longest running joke on the show. Very dry. Love it. Right? Jon says he doesn't have time for that, right? And this is part 4 of why I'm coming to terms. And this is, yes, you're right, Daniel. Yes, it is. Okay? Whatever. Screw you. Okay? And people on the internet call it generis. That's what the shippers call it, right?
Come on. No. I don't like that. I don't like that name.
I also agree that I think that name is lame. I think it's really, really lame. And shippers out there, because I know you listen, work harder. Be better, okay? It's not a good name.
Although their names don't really flow. Like, you can't call them, like, Starkarian or something like that. It doesn't work.
Starkarian sounds pretty cool, actually. I don't know if it's better than Daenerys, but...
Well, he's not even a Stark, so it'd be Snowgarian.
Either way, I think it's... Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Snowdaris.
The whole thing is that it's clearly all foreshadowing, and it's like I talked about with the marriage thing earlier that she said in Marine. He doesn't have time, she doesn't have time. It's like even if it's not a marriage out of passion like the Robb marriage was, right? Mm-hmm. It's a political one, and it would work, and then again their chemistry will build, and then it will work out. In that creepy sense, right?
It's still pretty weird, but it will for sure start as a marriage of convenience more than anything else.
And I just think if it doesn't happen at this point, I'm almost basically at the point where even if I think it's weird, I think it's still probably going to happen on the show, just based on all this evidence.
Yeah, it's very likely going to happen.
And I think it would make a lot of people happy. I don't know, like where do you you have to like lay out your thoughts and feelings about the idea of them getting married. Where does that like lay down for you?
It's so hard because, we've been talking about it for so long. There's so many different theories. It almost feels like it's too easy. But you have to remember, like, all this was laid out years and years ago. Like, when Martin was planning out this series, he knew this is where it was going to head. So, it's a testament to how popular the series and the show and the books have been. The fact that people have all these theories and we're always talking about it. It's likely that we've hit the nail on the head a few points. Some of us, I'm not saying myself necessarily, just people in general. So I think it's very likely this is going to happen, and it's going to feel slightly less satisfying just because we've been, we're prepped for it. We're assuming it's going to happen, right? That's where I like as a series lover, as a book lover, and a show lover. That's where I land on it because it's I'm already assuming it's going to happen. You know what I mean?
I guess so I see what you're saying, and I get it, because I felt that same way. Something like, for instance, with what was the show, American Gods. I felt that the final reveal at the end of that first season was not so satisfying, because I knew that's where it was going. Right?
We all knew who he was. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this, it's a bit different, because we have all these years of buildup, and seeing, for those who want that to happen, right? I know that, and there's a huge camp of people that want that to happen, right? Seeing something that they want to happen come to fruition over time can also be satisfying, even if that final moment isn't like a big shocker or surprise, right?
Yeah.
So that's my
I don't know. I know, I can tell ahead of time. It's going to feel the same way I felt when they did that flashback and revealed Jon's parentage. It's like, I've been talking about it for so long. I've been thinking about it for so long that it's not much of a revelation anymore.
Sure, but at the same time,
there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, right? It was still nice to, like, there's that moment where, like, okay, finally it's out in the open.
Instead of sure. Just like, and I enjoyed that scene. It's just it didn't have that same oomph as I think you would want a revelation to have.
Yeah, I mean, not everything can be the Red Wedding, I guess.
Of course, and there's no way to create that. You know, you can't have that Darth Vader moment anymore. The Luke, I am your father moment. It doesn't work.
That's the moment you're talking about.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure which Darth Vader moment.
Oh,
that's the Darth Vader moment. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you fucking know.
Okay. Anywho, where were we? Okay, so they have that chat about him having a crush. Next, Davos and Jon run into Missandei. And speaking of crushes, for some reason Davos seems to have a crush on Missandei. Yeah, that's a
weird little dynamic they have going on there.
Very strange. It's like it's like a first man to first lady kind of dynamic, right?
It's also weird. Like, and I keep going back to, like, I'm imagining reading this sequence in the books and how it's going to play out. And Missandei's like 12 in the books. Okay, and Davos is a middle-aged man. I
imagine it'll. I don't know. Maybe I think it would go a bit differently.
I hope so, but
okay.
You know.
Anywho, Missandei gives them like a brief overview of why everyone loves Dany so much. And I think like the two of them, Davos and Jon, are a bit skeptical because it does sound a bit culty, you know, a little bit. That's the impression I got anyway. That's how I read it. Now, Snowblack the Oracle mentioned on Twitter, and he tweeted us last week as well, that and we got a whole ton of Twitter stuff, and I can't get to it all. But I did happen to, so I watched the show live, and I don't live tweet it during the initial watch because I'm like need to be fully paying attention. But this week for this episode, I watched it like an hour later. I turned it back on and retweeted the whole episode. Again, like an hour later. Again, if you're not coming to it live, you know, avoid Twitter. It's a spoiler haven. Okay. Yeah. But it is really fun to chat with people about stuff that just happened. Like, oh man, can you believe this happened? Or like, oh wow, did this happen? And like seeing people put GIFs on of different things that are really funny. It's all like I saw. Did you know that? I'm sure you saw it in the Slack group. That one of that guy sitting in a room that's on fire, and he's like, oh, this is all fine, right?
I haven't gone into this. Like,
okay, so
I had to turn off the notifications because you people are animals, and I watched the show late as well, and I had Twitter and Slack were turned off.
Okay, so anyway, you know the picture I'm talking about, Dan? People always use it on stuff. It's like a meme, right? The guy sitting in a chair, there's fire everywhere, and he's like not even reacting. He's like, everything's fine. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm fine with this. I think that's from like Adventure Time or something.
Yeah, so there's that, but with Jaime's head on it. He's surrounded by fire, and he's just, everything's fine. Right. Very funny stuff. So that's the kind of stuff you get to see on Twitter afterwards. But back to what I was talking about. Snowblack the Oracle mentioned on Twitter that he thought that the two of them, Jon and Davos, potentially planted a seed of doubt in Missandei about how free she, quote unquote, actually is. Now, I didn't quite read it that way, but what do you think of that?
Oh, they were definitely challenging her notion of freedom and her like what her role is in Daenerys' army. I don't think the same limitations apply, obviously, and I do believe that Daenerys would let her go if she genuinely wanted to.
Right.
But from Jon and Davos' perspective, of course, it's going to look that way. So it makes sense for them to try to weasel in there.
It's the thing that like shocked me about this scene. Shock is maybe a strong word, but it's just. how personal of questions they just jump right into these like very personal questions with
nobody talks like that.
Yeah, like you just like go up to a random person. So tell me, like, what was the relationship with your father? Like,
exactly.
You know, like it seems a bit much, but you know,
no, they're asking her what she does for work, and then kind of like shitting on her job, like give it a rest, you know?
Right. Oh, so you work at McDonald's then, hey?
Yeah,
how does that? Does that pay the bills?
They made you a manager? Is that what they did? Wow. Okay. That's what they're doing to her.
Yeah. It's kind of a shitty thing. It's more Davos than Jon.
It's condescending, and nobody likes that.
No one likes it. So they're having this conversation, and Jon looks up, and he says, like, is that a Greyjoy ship out there? And next scene we get is Theon Greyjoy and his men just carrying up the boat up the beach, which I think is actually a pretty cool shot of them like lifting it and carrying it up off into the sand. And Jon is there to greet them. And Theon gives him a very curt hello. So some people, Dan, I don't know if you know this, some people have been talking about Alfie Allen being like the secret best actor on the show. And I don't know if I'm fully on board with that theory, but I can say for sure that he does a really good job in this scene. He did a really good job last week. Not last week. Last week he had like in his 2 second scene, he did a pretty good job. In the scene in the week before, he's been spot on gold for a while, right? And basically, I can't think of a time that Alfie Allen has given a bad performance, but I did like his performance here, is basically what I'm getting at. So Theon asks Jon about Sansa, and that sets him off a bit. He tells them that if it wasn't for what he did for Sansa, he would have killed them right there. Jon then asks him, why are you here? He tells them what happened to Yara. He says he's looking for help with the Queen. Then we get that line from Jon that the Queen isn't there. Hard cut to Jaime. Dum, 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 dum. But this scene with Jon and Theon, what did you think of it?
Oh, yeah, I think you're absolutely right that Alfie Allen, I wouldn't say he's underrated because everybody recognizes that he's a great actor, but he's one of the characters you don't necessarily think of as the headliners, right? Mm-hmm. I know he's amazing in everything he does. It's like, I think we were talking about this last week. This is the 7 seasons of the show paying off when these characters come back around and get back together. It's happening with Jon and Theon. It's happening Arya, Sansa, Bran all coming together, right? Melisandre in Winterfell. All this stuff that they're all coming full circle, and the dynamics of these characters are starting to pay off. It's rewarding to see them after having been through whatever they've been through come back together, right? This is one of those circumstances.
It's the reward of long form storytelling.
Sure.
Which you can't get in a movie, or you can't get as well in a movie. That comes with long form serialized storytelling. And this show is like the epitome of that, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the headliner, shall we say, right? And I just called it the battle scene, but HBO calls it the loot train battle, which doesn't really roll off the tongue.
The loot train battle.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't I don't know if you know this. At HBO, the shorthand for the Battle of Bastards is just Bob, right? They're just like, oh man, this is way bigger than Bob.
The B.O.B.
They just call it Bob, which is weird because it's like the radio station. But it's like, oh, this is bigger than Bob. Blah blah blah. What do you call the loot train battle? It doesn't even have a good acronym.
The
LTB, like that doesn't.
Yeah.
It's also like, lettuce, tomato, and bacon.
That's actually pretty good. As entertaining as this was, I don't think it'll ever be on that same level. It's not gonna be one of those things we're gonna be like, oh, there's the Blackwater, there's Hardhome, there's the Battle at the Wall, the Battle of Bastards. This isn't necessarily on that same level.
But from a visual standpoint, it's up there with those though.
Oh no, for sure. It's
very
entertaining. Yeah. But in terms of the size and scope of the actual battle and the importance,
I don't even know. I think the scope of it is also huge too. I think the difference is the stakes of what's actually happening here aren't as big. This is just like some wheat that they're blowing up, right? It's the back end of the Lannister line. It's not even their full army, right?
That's what I'm saying.
But at the same time, you're still dealing with a whole Dothraki horde. There's a dragon involved. Like there's still a lot, like from a logistics standpoint, there's still a lot happening here. It feels a little like from a visual standpoint feels a bit bigger than Bob, but I don't actually like that I started doing that.
Yeah, you got to stop that.
I know, BOB actually. It feels a bit bigger than BOB, right?
You can say Battle of Bastards. It's really not that hard to say, and it doesn't take that time.
Okay, anyway, so Battle of Bastards. But that had so much weight to it, right? It looked better. I think it cinematically was pulled off.
And it was set up basically that whole season.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that it's a battle. Like, you have one side facing the other, meeting in battle. This was a surprise attack.
It's like an ambush, yeah.
And it was surprising for the audience as well, which is, it was crazy. I was on the edge of my seat, But
I was, I was like, listen, we'll get to it. But let's start from the beginning here. So, now, it wasn't clear to me where this battle is actually taking place. And now they mentioned getting the rest of the army over the Blackwater Rush. They're close enough to know that all the gold made it through the gates of King's Landing. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't really paint a full picture for me exactly how that is. We know they're coming from Highgarden as well. So there's a general area there from an environmental topological sort of standpoint.
I mean, it's a pretty long road from Highgarden to King's Landing. It's weird that Jaime is all the way back there if that's the tail end of their
rear guard, yeah.
Because you would assume, Randall Tarley isn't there, and you would assume that he has the vanguard, the forward-facing forces. But you'd assume Jaime would be closer to the front as well.
Or at least in the middle,
But it kind of seems like he's kind of going back and forth, sort of overseeing
as generals
the caravan.
Do. Yeah.
It's fine that they're there. Like, I'm not...
Yeah.
Whatever.
So... it looks pretty cool. This is different than anything we've seen before. Like these, it's almost a Western theme, right? Which I think is on purpose. Maybe they just used the Westworld set. I don't know. But we've got these big mountains that kind of look like Arizona a little bit, but more grassy. Mm-hmm. It's very different than any kind of landscape we've actually seen at any time on the show. But at the same time, very beautiful shot. Landscape area. Again, most of it's CG, but it still looked really good.
I'm also really confused as to where this is geographically. Like you said, it's close to King's Landing. I assume it's in the Southern Crown Lands somewhere, but I don't know how Daenerys... it's fine that she got the dragon there, but the rest of her army, I don't know how you do that without being noticed. It's not a big deal. Point, I don't understand where she landed and how that happened.
So, someone on Twitter kind of chimed in at SKDubs21. Got back to me, and they just go by Sansa Stark on Twitter is their name, but obviously that wouldn't make any sense if Sansa. I was like, so Sansa Stark told me this, right? Doesn't make any sense. So at SKDubs21 on Twitter got back to me with what sounded pretty reasonable as far as a location. Okay, he says, likely near the Prince's Pass, kind of sorta on the way to King's Landing, and how you'd get to Dorne over land, which explains the desert-ish landscape. Now, does that make sense to you? Makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you?
Like I said, that's the Southern Crown. No, that's Southern Stormlands, I believe. I don't know. I don't have a map in front of me. But between the Crownlands and Dorne is the whole of the Stormlands, and I believe where it becomes more of a desert, where the Prince's Pass is at least... I don't know. I could be off with my geography here, but that seems much further south than is reasonable for them to be coming from Highgarden. I could be wrong. I
don't know. Again, it's just not clear as to where.
But it's also one of those things like the Storm Lords and anybody in that area. Haven't been part of the show since season 2, I would say. So
who are I don't even know who those are.
The Baratheons were the Storm Lords.
Okay. There's none of them left. So.
Well, no, they aren't. But their vassals are all still there. I don't know what happens to all those houses and those knights, but
I guess they're now. It's not a big deal. I don't know. Loyal to the Lannisters now. I guess it's not clear.
Fair to assume that though, because they took over that army.
Mm-hmm. So before the battle begins, we get a few moments with Jaime, Bronn, and Dickon. Of course, any scene with Bronn is enjoyable, especially when he makes fun of Dickon's name. It's really funny. He just starts laughing. But I appreciated this scene a bit more because it took some time to establish Dickon a bit. Now, I mentioned a couple weeks back that actor playing Dickon had changed since last season to Tom Hopper, who plays him now. But he got such a short scene before. I didn't even notice that Tom Hopper is actually the same actor who plays Billy Bones on Star's Black Sails. And I noticed this week because he obviously got more lines of dialogue other than just saying his name. And I actually liked him a lot in Black Sails, and I like him here as well now that he's gotten a little bit of screen time. And they kind of talk about his first experiences in war. And it's all kind of a shame to me because I'm just assuming he's probably going to die fairly soon, which is why they gave him any lines of dialogue. I mean, at the same time, like, why recast to such a better actor? Then that's not fair. I don't know how good of an actor the last guy was, but to this guy who's a pretty good actor, if you're just going to kill him off right away, but they did the same thing with last season for one episode, right? From American Gods, right, Dan?
Ian McShane.
Yeah,
you're talking.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. I was like, I was floundering there, Dan. I was like, jump in.
I had no idea what you were talking about for a while.
Okay, all right.
You said American Gods, and it got me.
Okay, so do you
also
anything,
Deadwood?
Yeah, of course. Anything about this stuff stand out to you? The pre-battle stuff?
The pre-battle stuff, not so much. Yeah, I don't have much to say about Dickon. You're right; he's gonna die right away. Sorry. I'm not sorry.
But who's a fan of Dickon? Like, no one's like, man, there's no like Dickon fan clubs out there.
And it's not that I'm not a fan of him. I guess if you want to get into his character, it's interesting. Like, you know how Sam reacted to his father. You know how overbearing and strict his father is.
Yeah.
So Dickon, I guess you have to feel sorry for him because he's just trying to do his best to fill that role that the elder son was meant to fill. If that makes sense. Everything that Sam ran away from became Dickon's responsibility. So he never been to battle before, whatever. He's just trying to be the best son he can. So also, I guess I feel sorry for him a little bit.
Well, they also mentioned that he had to fight against people he knew, right? Which is pretty shitty. Also
people
similar
he
to
knew, people he grew up with. Like,
that's insane, right? So I mean, it's nice. Go ahead.
You talk about houses like there's such a weird concept in the show and in the series. And we talked about it a couple episodes ago when Randall Tarley, he seems like a man of honor. Like he values his honor. He values his place in the world, and he doesn't murder people at weddings and all that stuff that he said. But he still turned his cloak at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But it's like in a situation like that, like what is honor? Who are you?
What does that even mean anymore? Yeah, what does that even mean anymore? It's exactly. Like, well, you're supposed to be loyal to the crown or loyal to your house. And like, it doesn't like. What does that even mean?
To bring it full circle, that's what Jaime's character is all about. He did what he thought was right, what was the honorable thing to do, and he's been punished for it. And since then, he's made mistakes or whatever.
He's been known as the Kingslayer ever since, right?
Yes, but in his mind, I don't think he sees himself as a villain for doing that. I think he still thought what he did was right.
Yeah,
and to a certain degree, is that not like the definition of honor?
Right.
So
it's funny that you bring up Jaime here because I actually got into this huge, it wasn't even a debate. It was a full-on debate with a full-on like book reader, like staunch book reader. Everything the book does is right. Everything the show does is wrong. I'm painting in black and white here, but it just to help. And on Twitter.
It's on Twitter?
Yeah. Right. Like their Twitter name is like ASIOF, whatever, like lover or something. It's anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. But basically, their tweet was, it's snarky, but it's still kind of appropriate. It's basically said that Dickon got more character development in this episode than Jaime's gotten since season 4, which I think is a little harsh. Which I said that, and then we got into this whole big thing. But at the same time, Jaime has been pretty stagnant as a character since season 4. And you bring up the fact that he did this thing that he thought was right to become known as, to kill King Aerys and all that kind of stuff, right? But in this case, I think this Twitter person was basically arguing that nothing, like, how can he possibly stand by after what Cersei did? Because didn't she just do what Aerys said he wanted to do, and that he killed him just for saying he was going to do it, never mind actually doing it, right? And so what does that mean for Jaime's character? We have this big turn in season 4, or we had thought kind of a bit of a turn in season 4, but nothing, if anything, he's regressed since then, which I think from a character standpoint isn't great. So what do you think about that?
No, definitely. I think we've seen that Cersei is his weakness. Like, in the time that he was away from her, that he was in the Riverlands, like that's where his character development was. That's how he grew, and he started to become a fan favorite, right? In season 1 and most of season 2, you hate him. He's a dick, and that's because he has so much of that Lannister pomposity rather in him.
Good word, pomposity. Good word.
And then after he's separated from all that, he's able to grow as a character, able to become his own man, so to speak, right? And now that he's back with Cersei, he has regressed. I don't think that makes him a less interesting character. I think that's just that's his weakness. That's his arc, and it's going to come down to either losing her to become a better person or fall victim to her and the disease that she is, as Olenna put it last episode.
Mm-hmm. She'll be the end of you, right? Is that
exactly
I think what she says? Yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines. So I mean, I can see what you're saying about how his character has kind of has become sort of like Cersei's lapdog almost. Like, he'll question her, but he'll still go along with it, right?
And it seems to go against what we knew as his character before, right? I guess.
But again, I think it's all about who you're exposed to. Like the people around him that were quote unquote positive influences. Let's say, like Brienne of Tarth is no longer there. And again, he's much more insular now. He's back in the Lannister camp. He might as well be taking orders from Tywin right now.
Right. It's not like the Cersei is a great, catalyst for change. And that's basically what I said on Twitter to this person, right? But they argued that the book, the last time that you guys saw Jaime in the books was the right way to do it. That he's already kind of started to come. It's different, right? That he's not backing Cersei in the same way. I think something to do with the High Septon. Do you remember, kind of what he's talking about, or how that?
God, it's been a while. I have to reread the books. I feel like the last time I saw Jaime in the books, and I could be wrong because it's been a while. He was going to the Riverlands to take River Run.
Right. Okay. Which we've seen.
And do that whole thing where he offered, like Edmure or the Blackfish, the deal to give you what's his fucking name? Catelyn's brother, Edmure.
Edmure. Yeah.
Give him Edmure. So, like, that's a while ago in the show timeline.
Well,
so it's all
season.
become muddled since then.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's have time on Jaime. There's more to talk about.
Yeah.
So it's during this conversation that Bran and Jaime and Dickon are having that Bran hears something, a soft rumble, and they start to scramble the troops. It's all very fun, all cool stuff so far. And we see this Dothraki horde stampede over the hill.
Dothraki screamers.
Yeah. And do you find it at all unsettling how, like, basically it's just like Native American cliche kind of thing? I find that a little bit.
It wasn't unsettling just because in the books they're always referred to as screamers, like that they're known to scream like that as they're going into battle, and that is sort of the analogy. There's sort of like a mixture of indigenous American tribes and like the Mongols essentially, right? Those are the cultural influences that created the Dothraki. So I didn't find it too unsettling, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. It's like, a little icky from it, but nothing too bad. So
it wasn't like a derogatory thing by any means, right? It was just that's what these people do. I don't know.
Yeah. It's all made up. People are all made up, right? Mm-hmm. So Bronn tells Jaime to take off for King's Landing, but being as cocky as ever, Jaime says that they can hold them off. And then there's this great moment where Dany rides in on Drogon right over sweeps over the plain, right over the horizon. And then at that which point, I presume that every Lannister soldier just crapped their pants.
Oh, of course. And by the way, I love all these like reaction shots of people like seeing a dragon for the first time.
Yeah.
It happened with Jon and Davos in the last episode, and Jaime this episode, Jaime and Bronn this episode.
It's amazing, and I literally cheered aloud at that moment. I was like, yeah! There's a couple moments in this battle sequence where I'm not like hooping and hollering, but I'm like jacked up, watching it. And that's just where it starts, So it's got to be up there. This whole thing's got to be up there in terms of Game of Thrones best, like in visuals. Drogon looked really good. The fire looked really good. All the people burning looked really good. And Dan, there might be a reason for that, because apparently HBO set more people on fire than any Hollywood production in history for this sequence.
Wow, good for them. Good for them.
Isn't that insane, though? I'm just thinking about like the logistics involved of lighting that many people on fire. It's like
that's a trophy you want
without having anyone die.
Most people lit on fire.
Yeah. Achievement unlocked. right there. But it does look really good, and they're like, people pointed this out later, but the best thing about really good CGI is you don't notice it, and good effects and all that kind of stuff is you don't notice it. It doesn't stand out because it just fits in with everything else, right? And it all looked so good that you don't even question it, right? It's just all happening. It's all there. It's all real, right?
But like we said earlier, it comes down to tangibility. Like, you have to be able to feel like you can reach out and touch it almost.
Yeah. And when you see people literally lit on fire, it kind of gives it that air of tangibility, I'd say. Mm-hmm. So obviously we're not going to go through every moment of the battle, but I thought we maybe would pick some of our favorite moments, right, to talk about, because it's hard to like go through, okay, then this happened, then this happened. So we'll just go, I'm just going to start and then with mine. And that shot of Drogon burning stuff from like left to right across the screen, you know, like just this shot of, it's so cool. It's like mostly orange, flying, oh man, it just laterally across the screen, burning shit, is one of the most gorgeous shots on the show, hands down. Do you know what
it is? And again, like
about?
thinking like logistically about that, like that's a hard shot to create.
Because you're literally blowing stuff up in real life using real fire, and then adding the dragon in later,
and more flames.
Yeah,
realistically, like just making it look cooler. Though it's insane. I couldn't. Like, I don't know. I watched it late last night. I couldn't pick a favorite moment of the battle, I guess, but like all of it, I was, like I said earlier, on the edge of my seat, and just I had no idea what. It's one thing that I should mention to the show's credit. You have these two opposing sides, and in this very specific moment, I don't know who to root for.
Yeah,
I didn't want anything bad to happen to Jaime. Like that's incredible that they're able to build that.
Right there.
Exactly.
That's the benefits that setting up this kind of stuff for.
And when we talk about payoff, we talk about 7 seasons of character building paying off now. Like that's what we're talking about. You have this setup where you don't want Jaime to die, but you still want the Lannisters to lose. You know, like you don't want Daenerys to turn into a monster.
It's
but
just you're so conflicted. What are you supposed to feel?
And even at that final moment, I don't know what I wanted to. I was like, holy shit! It's like that's the epitome of the edge of your seat moment when you like in most movies, whatever you can kind of predict.
I don't remember exactly, but I feel like I must have sat up at that moment, right? Because they set it up too with like the. Don't be an idiot, you know. With Tyrion.
Yeah.
And you're like,
because even Tyrion is a proxy for the audience.
Yeah.
He is conflicted. He wants to win the battle, but he's also watching Lannister soldiers burn. That still hurts him. Yeah. And then he sees his brother, the only family member that he cares about, that he's ever cared about to kill himself, and it's partially Tyrion's fault. He's as conflicted as any of us. It's amazing.
Yeah, the whole thing is just great. So obviously, Dan, you don't have any other favorite moments, but I'll just go through mine then. When the Dothraki stood up on their horses to fire their bows is so fucking cool. Like people were like calling for gifs of this immediately on Twitter. Like they're like it just, and they like one guy was like, I just rewound it over and over and over again and watched that moment over and over and over because it is really fucking cool, right? Here's a question though. What role does the Dothraki actually play in this battle? Because I feel like she just basically sacrifices a bunch of Dothraki, which she could have got all that stuff done with just the dragon, right?
I mean, more or less. I mean, if it's just the dragon, then every single archer is aiming up. Like, you need a distraction.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
But also, like, in case something happens, like protection, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's also a show of force, which is important, I think, as well. Now, I think a lot of people brought that up. That just came to mind now. But they've taken in two big losses in a row, and a show of force like that is important, right?
Yeah, but you're right. The dragon did more of the heavy lifting, and because this was a surprise attack, and this was ostensibly to get rid of their supplies. Like it wasn't even about the armies. It wasn't about troops.
So, but she does sacrifice a good number of Dothraki. I don't presume they didn't suffer that many losses because they were.
Well, they made a point of cutting to Lannister soldiers running away and having a Dothraki general say to Tyrion that they don't fight very well. So it's safe to bet that we didn't lose a lot of Dothraki.
Do you think
you're right. They didn't
does
really
Tyrion
serve much
speak,
purpose.
Does he understand what he said when he said that? He doesn't speak that.
I don't think Tyrion does. Maybe he learned in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, okay. Because that stood out to me.
Which,
like, wait, what?
By the way, as I'm getting back home this week, I'm going to learn a Dothraki sentence by the end of our season from that Read Pop thing.
Okay, cool.
Making it a thing, and we're going to say it on
make
the
that
podcast.
a thing?
I'm going to learn something cool in Dothraki.
Find out what fetch is in
no, that's
Dothraki.
The Dothraki have no word for fetch.
Because it's not a thing. Okay, So another couple of my favorite moments. There's this really fun continuous shot of Bran after he gets knocked off his horse. What a badass move there, by the way, by the Dothraki to like cut the leg of that horse. It's really brutal, but really cool. Knocks him off his horse.
I was very surprised by that because the Dothraki revere horses.
But they also eat horses, right?
Yeah, they eat horses, but it also it's dishonorable, but they're not jousting, and the Dothraki don't care about that. So that's perfectly within character. I feel like that's something that I would imagine Bronn doing first more than the Dothraki.
Well, he does have that really badass dagger throw, right?
Yeah.
And like he just he parries it with his like cutlass or whatever. What are those things called? Sides. They have a name.
Shit. No, they have a specific Game of Thrones name. Let me think. Keep going.
Okay, that's fine. You let me know what that is when it comes to you. But okay, so this continuous shot is really cool, right? It's reminiscent of the one that Jon had in the Battle of Bastards, right? But I don't think it was quite as good. In what?
It's an arak.
An arak. Okay, right. You add that to your sentence. Anyway, so did you think that this continuous shot was as good as the one that they did with Jon? Because I didn't.
Again, like this doesn't have the same weight, but it was still it's a great immersive shot that really brings you into the battle, right? And that's something you haven't seen Dunkirk yet, but that's exactly the same thing. I have seen Dunkirk. Oh, you have now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it on the other podcast. Yeah, but that's what they do a lot. It's immersive. It makes you feel like you're inside of the battle rather than just watching it.
The way I describe, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a while on the podcast, but Dunkirk is basically an exercise in anxiety.
Oh my God.
I didn't quite get that sense with this shot with Bronn. Listen, I like Bronn. I do. I really do. Personally, I think there's a moment in this episode where I think he probably should have died realistically, if you're, as realistically as you could get with dragons. But this one just doesn't work quite as well as the one with Jon. Again, I think just that Battle of Bastards just a little bit more cinematic. So that kind of thing.
But it's still really good, characters. Like Bronn has probably served his purpose in the show. Like he probably could have and should have died, and it would have been sad. I know he's a fan favorite; everybody loves him.
Yeah. But
what role does he serve at this point?
I guess I just want to maybe a cooler death than that. I guess I don't know.
That's a pretty badass way to die.
I guess being burnt to death by a dragon.
That's probably the most badass way to die.
You think? I think it's gonna be one of the most painful ways to die.
Facing down a fucking dragon.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. He did get,
and he landed a punch.
He did get a shot in, right? Someone wanted to call him a dragon feller, and on Twitter, and I was like, well, can you call him a feller if he doesn't kill it? And he's like, technically,
he felled it.
You felled it, right? And I was like, well, that's fair. And I got into this whole thing about calling. He's like, well, he does seem like a nice feller. So
yeah. that's what he's a dragon feller.
Yeah. He's also a nice feller too, presume. Well, not that nice of a feller, but anyway, I just thought that was funny. Anyway, so.
I was genuinely concerned that Drogon was going to die.
Yeah, I was more concerned about Drogon, and I'm not the only one. I was more concerned about Drogon in this scene than I was for Dany. That's where my heart was 100%. In my throat that whole time when he's like the first one misses, I'm like, and then the second and then it hits him, and I'm like, no, and he's like,
especially because the way that they shot it, he's flying and his mouth opens right towards the camera, like it's gonna go down his throat. He's gonna kill this motherfucker.
Just like they showed us in with the skull, right?
Yeah.
But no, it hits him in the arm. So some people are upset because it's it felt like cheesy or cheap to have him free falling and then just kind of miraculously get be fine. First of all, I don't think he was fine after getting hit by that what would you call it, a bolt from the scorpion?
A bolt.
And I imagine as listen, the first time you get shot is probably the worst part of it too, but you can rally from it. Not everyone dies from every gunshot wound, right? Right. So I just imagine that part was pretty shocking to Drogon, and he rallied a bit so that he didn't die, because presumably if you just crashed into the ground head first, that wouldn't be healthy. So there's that part too. So that was fine. It was cool seeing him free fall though. That's a cool shot as well.
Presumably that's not the only scorpion they built. It still feels like that whole scene with with Qyburn and Balerion's skull is foreshadowing something larger towards the end of the season. That I don't know. If this is where that story paid off, that's stupid.
Yeah, and obviously didn't, right? So Drogon's not dead, right? Yeah, right. So, which is the same thing. Same time, which why I'm not worried about Dany here is that clearly she's not dying in this episode of the show. You know, like, so there, that's kind of where I felt like I just didn't want the dragon to die, right? That was where I kind of came down on that.
But it is a testament to her hubris. You know, she thought she was invincible on the dragons. This will hopefully make her a little bit more cautious going forward.
Have you considered dragon armor? Because that would be fucking cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much dragon.
Yeah, you saw all those arrows bounce off his chest, right?
Right. But like maybe like some like something plated to like protect. Well, now that they know that the scorpion exists, protect like the vulnerable parts, right? Just a thought, right? So, Bran, like you said, Bran gets to the scorpion, which they now call the scorpion, so it has an in-world name now, which was from the books, which is I'm sure pleases book fans. There's a cool thing. I love how like the trailer thing just like pops open, and it's like a anti-air weapon. It's very cool. And but there's that moment when Drogon goes and basically burns the whole thing, but he jumps off. Like, and by the way, it's like it's not even 2 seconds, it's like a 1 second scene of him jumping off. I want a gif of that because it looks silly. It looks really silly, and I think he should have died there.
That's for sure where he should have died.
Yeah. Then, of course, the episode ends with Dany trying to pull out the scorpion bolt from Drogon, which, logistically speaking, is probably not the best place to just stand around, right? Uh-huh. In the middle of a battle. She also seems very nonchalant about the whole thing, right? Her back's turned to everything. It's very convenient. It's fine. It's just kind of funny to me. Tyrion's watching, and like you said, he's very conflicted about this whole thing, but he's watching Jaime. And Jaime sees Cersei. I almost said Cersei sees Dany down there, and his idea is to, I guess, impale her joust style with a spear. Charges towards. Why do I keep wanting to say Cersei?
I mean, they're both blonde, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Charges toward Dany, and there's this really cool shot of Drogon's head just jumping into the frame, right? His like mouth glowing red, and then gets knocked off the horse at the last second into the water, presumably by Bronn. That's not clear to me, but I think it's probably Bronn.
I think it's a safe bet that was Bronn.
Yeah,
I think it's really weird for his character to do that, but fine.
Yeah, it doesn't really. At the same time, how else is he going to get paid?
I mean, I don't know. I guess the rest of Cersei and the rest of the Lannisters.
Yeah, but his relationship is with
Jaime.
Yeah.
Realistically, it just it doesn't seem like a very sellsword move to sacrifice.
Yeah, but he seems like he's a sellsword with a heart to some degree, a little bit, right? A little, maybe. No, he's kind of sellsword. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. He does complain about not having a castle after being handed a bag of gold.
And there was a moment where we believed he was a sellsword with a heart when Tyrion went and was like, "I need your help," and he was like, "Well, you're not going to pay me, so no."
Yeah, that's true.
Remember that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Touche. I completely forgot about that moment. But you're right. I mean, but here's the other possibility. It was Dickon.
See, I get that. It looked like Bronn's shirt and his hair, whatever, but it was a really quick scene.
It was so fast. I honestly don't know.
Moreover, Dickon already saved Jaime once, and he served that role once this episode. It'd be weird for him to do it again.
When did he? Oh, right. Yeah.
That one Dothraki with the two Arraks was going to kill Jaime and Dickon stabbed him in the back. And there was a whole thing where they look at each other and did the nod that everybody does when
you save someone's life.
You acknowledge somebody else's. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can. I'm going to pull up the scene here. I'm going to watch it in real time.
It's a very specific nod. But it's in every movie you've ever seen.
He's about to get killed, Drogon's face, and then it's clearly Bronn. I paused it at the moment. There's no way
you
it's
actually
not
had
Bronn.
It right in front of you. I thought you were joking.
No. Actually, so I have it's absolutely Bronn.
It's for sure.
He's not
Bronn.
wearing armor because Dickon's wearing armor, and this guy's not wearing armor. So now there's an ominous kind of section to it where they're kind of like. It's unclear whether or not moving like underneath the water, I guess for just dramatic effect. But the way I read it is there's no fucking way in hell that either of those two are dead right now.
It would be a really weird way to kill them off.
Right, like, why have him try to save him if he's just going to die anyway? Like, they're just like, What's the point then? So,
although I would say and this is something that happens in the series often, Jaime is in like full plate armor with a golden hand, he would sink.
Yeah,
that happens often in the books rather. But it's also one of the things I found passingly weird was how the horse was like ankle deep in the water and then Jaime sinks to an abyss.
You're right. Here's the thing:
like 2 feet over.
I have seen people complain about this as well, and the only explanation I can have is that the river is in some kind of flood state,
alternate reality.
No,
is that what you're going to say?
Okay. So the banks have kind of spilled over a bit, and deep enough so that the horse is running through it, but the deeper part of the river is just a little bit further
just 2 feet away.
Yeah, that's right.
2 feet.
That's right.
All right, if that's the best you can do, like that's fine. But like that's ridiculous.
But also we're watching a drama, so I'm willing to buy. Like it is a cool shot, sure.
It's a really cool shot, and I think it would be I don't think he's dead, but it would be sort of one of those like subversive moments where it's like Jaime in his mind is being the hero, and even if he died by dragonfire, he would die a hero, but he was kind of saved, and then he ends up having an ignoble death because he just drowns in
he's not going to die.
Muck.
He's not dead.
I know he's not. There's
no way. So all right, so I mean,
but also where do you go from here? If he doesn't die, there's a dragon right next to him.
It's funny you should ask. Sarah Parkinson on Twitter asks, "What do you think is next for Jaime?" And I'll add, this is me. I'll add Bran in as well. Where do we go from there?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you. Yeah, I'm asking you.
Okay. Because I thought I was asking you, but okay.
yeah. Okay, I was asking you because Sarah was asking.
Okay,
us.
so Sarah's asking me. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance maybe they wash downstream and they get away from the battle. Kind of thing.
No, see, I don't buy that at all. That's funny. That's funny though. I did not even consider that because that is even more ridiculous than the water being 20 feet deep next to 2 feet deep. There's no way they just wash downstream.
Okay, so then he's gonna be sinking, fade to black, and then realize, oh, I can stand up in this water. He'll stand up, and then he's a prisoner or he's eaten by a dragon.
So here's what I think. I think we'll see the aftermath of this at the beginning of next week's episode. Jaime's captured again. Him and Jaime are captured, which gives us the opportunity for Jaime to meet Dany for the first time, a new interaction, a new dynamic with Tyrion. Sure. And I just don't think that the writers pass up an opportunity for that. Like that's just I can just see it spilling out of their brains, just golden screen.
No, you're right. And
it
would be awesome for him and Tyrion to meet up again after everything that's happened, because Tyrion probably would vouch for him like he did for Jon, which hasn't necessarily worked out, and Tyrion isn't necessarily in Dany's best books right now. It's
working out better for Jon, to be fair.
I'm just saying, I think Dany is more suspicious and skeptical of Tyrion now than ever. And
I think he would know that. So which makes for very interesting dynamic, like I said. So I hope that that's the case, right?
And Tyrion would be the one to step in. Like Dany would either want to have Drogon eat or burn Jaime, and Tyrion would be the one to say that this guy's at the very least he's worth something as a POW.
Yeah. I mean, I think even Jon might vouch for keeping him as a prisoner.
Well, Jon's not there, but
Jon's not there, right? I mean, either way. Okay, so put it this way, and I basically alive or captured, dead or captured. It's a huge blow. It's a huge blow to the Lannister cause here. With Cersei's army.
Oh, yeah.
She just lost her best general. I mean, I guess her best general, because Tarly's still around, right? He wasn't at the battle. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't
Randall
at the battle.
Tarly should be at. I would assume he would be in the Vanguard, and he's at King's Landing.
Right. So he's not going to be involved, but that's now her only general, basically. Him and Euron, right? Although Euron's been doing pretty well. So I mean, it's a huge blow, no matter what the outcome is. But I think we both can agree that Jaime's for sure not dead, and I really hope to see him in a captured state next episode.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was going to mention, so there's a couple questions that we got. This one was John Bennett on Twitter. In a similar vein, asks, what are, any chance Bronn and Jaime get taken prisoners? Yeah, we just talked about that.
I think it's safe to assume, yes.
Does Tyrion go behind Dany's back and release them? I think that's safe to say that's probably not the case as well. and or is it more likely they'll just join her side? It's all very, it's hard to say, right? I don't think so. I just don't. I don't know, but I don't think so.
We talked a couple times in this episode about characters getting back together. It would be also interesting to see Tyrion and Bronn back together.
Yeah.
I think if either of the two are going to turn, it would be Bronn.
Well, he's just more easily bought and sold. So Dany wouldn't trust him.
But Tyrion's been able to utilize him in the past, and I think
different Tyrion, different time.
I think it's fairly clear, especially with what just happened, that the Lannisters are going to be losing. I think Bronn would be likely to switch and get back together. Like, it's not like he didn't like Tyrion; it's just that he went where the money was, right? So if he sees the tide turning, he will also turn. Yeah. Jaime, I mean, if Cersei's still alive, he won't betray her.
Yeah, no. Unless he's the one who actually does it, which I still chances are I believe.
I would love to see that. That'd be very satisfying, but I don't know.
It's hard to say. We've talked about that in the past, so I don't want to get too deep into that. All right, so final thoughts. Dan, what was your favorite scene from this week's episode?
I think we're going to have the same one. It's got to be the battle. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Just in terms of the emotions I was going through during that battle, like I said before, about not knowing what side I'm really on. Although I know I'm not on the Lannister side, I am on Jaime's side somehow. It's so weird and conflicting, and I don't know. I've said the term "edge on my seat" a million times, but like that's the best way to describe it. Like I was amped up. I couldn't sleep afterwards. You know. Like,
yeah, I watched the episode again an hour later. Yeah, and I never do that. It's absolutely the loot train battle. It's awesome. Again, need to workshop that name, guys. I mean, just saying. Yeah. But just
and that's not to say that the other stuff wasn't good. Like I love, like you said earlier, the scenes with Jon and Dany. Yeah, we need that kind of stuff. We need to build that relationship. I love that too. It's just this was a whole other level.
So overall, it sucked that this episode was so short. Technically, this is the shortest episode of Game of Thrones we've ever had. Runtime wise, it felt short in length, but it didn't feel rushed at all. I think it was really well paced. Yeah, I think it's one of the most well paced episodes we've got all season.
They've hit that balance this season because all the episodes sort of seem short but not rushed.
Well, this one technically, but at the same time, this one is technically short.
It's the shortest, but it didn't necessarily feel much shorter than the last episode.
I felt a little bit, but not a lot, for sure.
But also, I've been on record. I've said, like, every episode has ended. I'm like, okay, where's the other 15 minutes?
That's right.
That seemed really short.
I think we'll get that later in the season. Obviously, it's great to see the Starks back together. It's a payoff from long-form storytelling, like we talked about.
I was wrong about that. I thought Arya was going south again.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did. I think that's how people read that scene with Nymeria, right? And this all works
because otherwise, what the fuck is that scene for?
I don't know.
Now I'm mad again.
It just brings Nymeria back, so we know she'll be around at some point. I don't
think she will. I think that's it.
Well, I don't know. Then you're right. Then it is what's the point? Okay, well we'll see. There's only one way to tell. Wait and see. And then obviously this all works because these seeds were planted literally years ago. It's this theme we've been talking about all season long, and I think this episode does a really good job of it as well. There's some really good character moments. The plot moves forward. It's nice to see Dany get a win. It's interesting seeing some of our favorite characters face off against each other. Like you said, Jaime versus Dany is definitely conflicting. The stakes of the final battle were real, even if it wasn't necessarily Dany we were concerned about. I
wasn't prepared for that.
No,
it's so easy to think like it's Daenerys versus Cersei, and you know what side you're on. But with other characters in the mix, it's harder.
Overall, I think it's just, like I said, spectacularly paced, if a bit short, and it dethrones last week's episode as my new favorite for this season.
Oh
yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, I think you hit it on the head. Like it is the best episode this season. One of the better episodes of the series. I know it's easy to say that having just watched the episode and you're kind of caught up in it.
I always try to avoid saying that, but sometimes it feels right.
This one really did though for me. It's just in terms of the way you feel, like the emotion. Like I said before, like I was so amped up. It's hard to describe, obviously, but. There are very few episodes that do that, especially now that the show has surpassed the books. Like, there are episodes like The Red Wedding or The Mountain and the Viper, like, where I sort of know what's going to happen, and I still, I love those episodes. That's great TV. But it's a different feeling when I don't know what's going to happen, and it still hits me like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, on that note, I think we can wrap things up. Where should I start? So many things to mention before we go. Follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast. Send us any emails, questions you might have to towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com. And speaking of sending things to our email, go leave us a nice review on iTunes or wherever. Take a screen grab, send that to that same email address, and we will be entering you into the contest to win one of the Read Pop Game of Thrones giveaways, okay?
The George R. R. Martin boxes.
That's right. And if you wanted to just go and buy one, skip that whole process of not knowing if you're going to win, head over to their website, readpop.com. That's REEDPOP.com. And when you're checking out, just punch in the code BabbleBox, BABBLEBOX, all one word.
All caps.
All caps into the promo code box in their checkout, and you'll get a discount.
10% off.
Yeah. And, of course, obviously head over to towerbabblepodcast.com/donate, towerbabblepodcast.com. So, did I say .com? towerbabblepodcast.com or towerbabbble.ca/donate. Either one will work. Find all the stuff that we do, as well as leave us a nice donation towards our GoFundMe campaign for this season. Am I forgetting anything? Oh, yes. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that our show notes are like 4,000 words long. It's a lot of work to put it that, it takes to write these. If anyone was interested in seeing what those look like, it's all in Google Drive. I can send out a link and you can just take a look at them. If anyone's interested in what that's like, I can put that on Twitter. Best place to reach me is there on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast. If that's something that seems like something, interesting at all or cool that would, add to the experience, there's no secret giveaways, like secrets in our show notes. So, but it might be cool for you to see exactly, how much, we actually put into it. So if you want to do that, again, at TowerBabbleCast on Twitter, if that sounds cool to you. And we'll be back next week with Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch.
Another very on-the-nose title.
It's definitely not subtle. Either way, we'll talk to you then. This week's Game of Thrones theme is an electric guitar cover by Fender Tobin, and you can find his work on YouTube.